Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto Perfected the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 17, The Big Day. Prank Day 110, last stage of the Chunin exam. Naruto? Iruka asked in front of the boy's door, having just knocked. Come in. Come in. The academy student chimed from inside his apartment. The Chunin stepped inside, having a quick look around. The many clones had months ago taken everything they found down in the Uruhara basement, and Iruka now saw his student's living place as it normally was. Not so bad, he thought. He'd expected worse. His own place, living alone as a child, wasn't as clean as this one. There were a number of ninja tools everywhere, including 2 kunai used to hold plants up. Still, no clothes on the ground, food boxes outside the trash, or anything like that. I'm nearly done, Naruto said, taking a big portion of noodles from his cup. Iruka sighed. Only Naruto would consider 3 cups of ramen a valid breakfast. The teacher took a seat opposite his student. You ready? Naruto nodded, mouth full of food. Your students ready too? He then inquired. Naruto swallowed. As much as she can, he spoke once he could talk again. I'll have an errand to do before we get to the arena, but that's all. It can't wait? We might be late if you aren't quick enough, Iruka pointed out. Naruto drained his last cup of ramen. Has to be done before the battle start, he replied, moving for his window. You coming? The window? Iruka asked, inclining his head. Well, we're in a hurry, aren't we? He pointed to the open window. That's a shortcut. Right. Iruka sighed, rising out of his seat. The pair dropped straight down in the alley, then continued below in the tunnels. Naruto's errand involved passing by the Uruhara basement. The Chunin wasn't surprised. Naruto clearly wasn't wasting time. The pair of them went straight to the basement at a good clip, and a clone handed Naruto a package as soon as he was inside the room. The boy then made his way deeper into the place. What are you doing? Iruka asked. He thought they'd be in and out in a moment. Follow me, the boy said. We're taking another exit. It'll get us closer to the arena. Iruka nodded and followed. He stayed behind his student, imitating the twists and turns Naruto made in the dark. Then came a long ladder going up, where Naruto stopped. He then started doing hand seals. Here, he explained, touching Iruka right above his nose. This'll help us not draw attention. He then repeated the seals to do the same on himself. What is it? The teacher asked. Genjutsu, Naruto answered, touching his own brow. Makes you appear as something completely normal. Iruka had never heard of such a genjutsu. Another one from the scroll of forbidden seals? He asked. No, Naruto replied, starting to climb. Rabbit technique. Nanabo taught it to me. Come on up. The Chunin had more questions, but now wasn't the time for them. He didn't know how much longer Naruto's errand would take, but they'd probably be cutting it close. He grabbed the first rung and started climb, making a note to follow up on that line of questioning later. Here, Mahoshi said, pointing to an empty row of seats. That's perfect, right? It will do very well, Fumichi replied. Ariko had to agree. They were close enough to the battlefield that they wouldn't miss much, and right beside an exit with that, just in case they need the restrooms or something similar. Better yet, they were situated nearly opposite to where Kiritori and Muramaru were, which would mean the clones would remember the action from 2 opposite viewpoints at the very least. Iruka and Naruto weren't yet in, as he was having a last-minute visit to perform. The False Academy student sat down, with Fumichi at her left and Ringo at her right. So, how's this going to go? She asked. First time seeing one of these? Asano asked, to which the Naruto Bunshin nodded. Kids, even academy students, couldn't come alone, even if they had tickets. Mahoshi's mother was the group's chaperone this time. Anyone here have the order of battles? She asked the others. Nishi handed her own leaflet. There's 11 battles planned for the day, Asano said, looking down at the schedule. First up is the 2 Hyuga, which should mean a quick taijutsu battle, she explained. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Ariko nodded. At least they wouldn't have to wait before seeing Hinata's training put to the test. Next after that is a Nara against. She looked at the descriptions of the fighter. A throwing specialist? Well, Naras are all about planning, so this one might go long or short depending on the latter's plan. Mihoshi and Fumichi both inclined their head at that, as if from experience. Ariko, who knew Shikamaru, expected long. Short would probably be too much effort. Then there's an Aburame against a Sand Wind Mistress, Asano continued. Advantage to Sand, clearly, Nishi pointed out. Ariko was pretty sure the name Shino was somehow familiar, but could remember who that was for the life of her. Last battle of the first round is a taijutsu specialist named Rock Lee against someone named Gaara. She once again went to check the description. Sand manipulator, it says here. Very powerful from what is written. Again, advantage to Sand, Nishi added. Then there's a 30-minute break before the second round, Asano finished, closing the schedule. That's all? Ariko asked. Only 4 battles? She was pretty sure Choji and Kiba were in the tournament, so where were they? There are a lot of ninja not fighting in the first round this time, Mitoto, Mihoshi's mother pointed out. Second round also has 4 battles, then 2 for third with only the final remaining after that. A third of the participants don't fight in the first round. Asano nodded in approval. Ariko had a quick look around, and didn't see her progenitor anywhere. Where was he anyhow? The fights were starting soon. Here they are, Hinata-sama, Naruto said, disguised as a random Hyuga. Another 20, he continued, handing her a storage scroll. Her eyes went wide. That makes more than 200, she exclaimed. Indeed, Naruto replied. 207 to be exact. Hinata lowered her head and blushed. Thank you? It is my pleasure, Hinata-sama, the fake Hyuga said, bowing. I will leave you to your preparations. Good luck in battle. Naruto then turned and walked out. What he just handed her were the last chakrams the clone network had received in the last 2 days. It made her full load out more than 200 of her discs, 3 soldier pills, that being the maximum recommended in a day, and 10 shadow clones stored in scrolls. The last one was a new discovery made after the network clones had tried to reconstruct what had happened a week ago. Turns out clones could be sealed, and that they don't spend chakra, or spend very little, while stored. This also makes them impossible to update, as memory bursts don't reach them. That was the reason this particular detail had been found, as Usagi was missing 4 hours of his day, even when the sleeping clones didn't. There was a group currently doing more tests, but they knew enough for that to be at least usable. It was even more important for Hinata, as she didn't have the capacity to generate shadow clones nilly-willy. Naruto then stepped in the closest washroom, coming back out under his normal appearance. Iruka stepped beside him as he arrived in the bleachers. So, errand done? Naruto nodded. Nothing I should have opposed, I hope? The teacher asked. Nothing illegal, Naruto replied. Just getting Hinata the remaining pieces of equipment the network received. So she needs equipment for whatever technique you taught her, eh? The Chunin stated. Not saying anything, Naruto exclaimed. You just can't let it go, can you? He then added. What? Iruka said, shrugging. A man has the right to be curious, you know. She's in the first fight, so you won't have to wait long, Naruto smirked. Ariko had updated him on the schedule. You'll see she'll do well. I'll reserve judgment until then, Iruka replied, sitting down. Thank you everyone for coming to Konoha's Chunin selection exam. The Hokage's voice rang all over the stadium as Naruto took his own seat. We will now start the main tournament matches between the 12 participants who made it through until now. Please stay, and watch until the end. Won't be long now, Naruto said as the Jonin referee explained the rules to the 12's genin in the arena. He could clearly be heard by everyone due to the acoustics of the place. First fight will be between Hyuga Neji and Huiga Hinata, the referee finally said. The rest of you, please stay in the waiting room until called. The other genin all left, leaving only the 2 Hyugas in the arena. Now, the first fight. The referee yelled. Begin! Begin! Hinata didn't wait a second, jumping back twice to put more space between her and her cousin. He let her do so, not even taking a fighting stance. Hinata-sama, please surrender, he said, loud and clear. Someone of your skill cannot defeat me. Talent is something that is decided at the moment one is born, and all the spars we have had only proven the fact that I am your superior. Your fate in this tournament goes no farther than this match." Hinata smiled hearing that. She'd heard similar from Naruto for an entire day, and the words only reminded her of the steps she'd made. She was no longer the person she'd been a month ago. "Fate or not, cousin, I do not care," she replied clearly. "I will make you dance," she intoned. She did another jump back, dropping a smoke grenade at the same time. She then reached into her pockets and withdrew the scrolls she had there. "Pathetic," she heard her cousin say. As if that would stop an Hyuga. Her simple smile did not falter. The smoke wasn't to hamper Neji, it was to hide her actions. A simple release of chakra, and there were 10 more Hinatas in the cloud. 3 stepped before and behind her, then they split into 2 groups, 5 running out on each side while a clone stayed in her former position. She, the real one, was the third exiting the cloud on the right. "What?" she heard Neji say. He finally took on a combat stance. Then she and all the clones started filling the air with metal. Each tossed chakrams in waves of 6, 3 from each hand. Neji, all the while, was looking from right to left, trying to figure out which one was real. Then he started dodging and blocking. He drew a kunai in each hand and deflected the few rings coming close to his position. There weren't many, as the many copies hadn't started aiming properly, just adding to the chaos of the arena. "Ineffective," he said, redirecting 2 chakrams. "Your skills at aiming are no better than your ability at the gentle fist." "We will see," all the clones said as one. As one, they stopped moving, the many Hinatas forming a half circle around Neji, 20 or so meters away. Only then did they start really calculating the various bounces to hit. Neji blocked another 2, then dodged another. Then 2 more. They redirected a pair while dodging another. "What is this?" he yelled. He found that he couldn't advance, the weapon's many crisscrossing paths giving him no way to step forward. He batted 2 more away. "This is the Festival of Rings, dear cousin," all the clones said once more. "Now dance for me." Hinata mentally thanked Naruto's help with her banter. It was clear the words were not helping Neji focus. The Hyuga boy quickly had no choice. He took a step back diagonally. Then he turned, stepping left, blocking a single chakram arriving straight at his back. Then another turn, another step, another block. And the many Hinatas were still throwing chakrams around. They had their timing well. As their last wave of chakrams left their hands, the returning rings started coming in range. They still had more in reserve, but kept those as backup. They grabbed and twirled, sending the weapons back seemingly effortlessly. Some went straight toward their foe, some went toward the walls to bounce there, and others were sent back right into the melee, deviating off some of the weapons already in flight. That was the drop that made the vase overflow. A thrown chakram bounced a ring that Neji had just redirected right back at the boy. He twisted out of the way at the last second, but couldn't evade a thin cut to the side of the neck, bleeding slowly. First blood had gone to the Hyuga heir. Neji made a decision right there and, as he twirled, a rotating sphere of chakra surged around him. Every weapon close to him was deflected instantly, bouncing back with incredible force. Still, only a couple came close to the clones, and a twirl later they were on their way back toward Neji. "Tenten," the many Hinatas said. She'd been afraid he'd master such a technique. He was clearly talented enough. But she was prepared for something like that. "That is nice, cousin. But how long can you keep it up?" As soon as the sphere disappeared, Neji tossed himself to the side. One ring scored a glancing hit on his arm, but he dodged the rest of the incoming projectiles. He then had no choice but to invoke the Tenten again, just to survive. He then kept it up. He had no other option, being relentlessly attacked from all sides. 3 clones each grabbed a pair of rings as they passed by. "What is a festival without flowers, cousin?" they said, interlocking the 2 chakrams. All 3 twirled them 3 times, dodging the few rings coming their way while the others redirected the rest. "Lotus flower, bloom!" the trio exclaimed, sending the paired weapons straight ahead, spinning like saws. And they were spinning in the same direction as the Tenten. The rings hit the rotating barrier at full speed. The first ring which hit didn't reach deep enough to touch Neji before being propelled back. But what it did was spin around the second, coming back with the force of the Tenten behind him. Neji realized that fact right before the rings returned, and threw himself to the side to dodge the blooming lotuses. He took a few hits to his arms and chest, but managed to protect his face. He then rolled, taking another cut, then dashed forward at his full speed, straight for the middle Hinata, which had just thrown a set of paired rings at him. He took a few more hits, mainly to the side and back. But he quickly arrived in the Hinata's melee range, and slammed his kunai straight into her heart. She vanished into smoke, and 100 rings, being cloned, disappeared from the air. That was a killing blow, Neji. The Hinatas shouted, this time not in perfect coordination. The shock had gotten to some of them. Indeed, Hinata-sama, he said, and the smile on his face was vicious. He deflected the few rings coming his way. What is a ninja if he cannot kill? Nothing, that is what. I am not like you, too weak to go against my foe with killing intent. This is why you are weak, shinobi. He dodged, then blocked 2 more rings as the clones started moving away, releasing more chakrams to try keeping the Hyuga boy at bay. Even now you do not go for a decisive blow, preferring to wait until your opponent tires himself. Another dash and another Kage Bunshin was eliminated, this one with a kunai straight to the eye. The branch member didn't even take any damage this time. The memory of the blade coming right her eye shook her out of her shock. You should not have done that, Neji. You will regret it. Make me, he growled, dashing at the Hinata who had just spoken. Bird dragon, reverse snake, reverse rat. Right-un, Mabushii Kagayaki. Hinata yelled, her cousin only 2 meters or so from her. He fell straight there, dropping face first to the ground. My eyes! He screamed, covering his face. 2 of the clones stepped forward, grabbing the chakrams coming close and keeping them. Hinata herself looked down at her cousin. He'd gone straight for a killing blow when he could have gone for something lesser. He deserved what he'd got. Proctor? She said. Do I need to finish him? Of course not, he said, stepping forward while dodging an errant ring. He then looked down at Neji, who was stumbling unseeingly on the ground. Winner, Hyuga Hinata! He yelled. The audience cheered. The real Hinata went and bowed, straight toward Naruto's seat first, then to where her father was seated. Her clones grabbed the still bouncing chakrams and collected them. It was her victory. An unexpected event, Kuritori said from his seat. How come? Muramaru replied. He really knew why, but he had to pretend he didn't. Neji is well known in taijutsu circles to have the greatest potential as a gentle fist user in this generation, the Chunin explained. And he proved it just now, performing the kaiten at such a young age. So he should have won, Muramaru said. No, Kuritori answered, shaking his head. The younger Hyuga's tactics were better. She created an environment that advantaged her and disadvantaged her opponent, controlled the flow of the battle, and forced her foe to deal with her in her terms. Even in the end, when things went sour, she still had a card she could play. No, the victory was all hers. So, Neji should have taken back the initiative earlier then? The male clone asked. He should never have let Hinata have it, he countered. He was secure in his superiority from the start, and let her set up her trap without even trying to oppose her. He was clearly faster than her, so he should have attacked right as the referee said go. He would have had the advantage, as this would have played to his strengths, and could have eliminated her quickly. He sighed. His arrogance was his undoing. What about the next match? Muramaru said. A Nara, which means a shadow specialist, against a range weaponry specialist. Another battle where one should strike hard right from the start, the teacher said. The Nara are efficient strategists, so giving them time to plan is the worst thing that can be done. The second battle. Tenten versus Nara Shikamaru. The proctor yelled. Begin. I'm not going to give you the time to outhink me, Tenten said, dropping a pair of scrolls on the floor. Twin rising dragons. The scrolls went up in a spiral, trailing smoke, and she jumped between them. Then she grabbed whatever weapons she could from the scroll, shooting them forward at high speed. Clearly, she had access to the same knowledge I did, Kuritori said. Shikamaru, of course, didn't sit still. He jumped backward a few times, getting more space between him and Tenten, then started dodging and running erratically. Still, Tenten's aim only became better as the seconds passed, and the Nara boy's dodges became more and more frantic. Then he grabbed a kunai coming at his face and stopped. What is he doing? Muramaru said, watching intently. Tenten did not say a word, reaching with her right hand for another weapon. Shikamaru's hand imitated hers, and once she had the shuriken in hand, he moved his hand to his throat, Tenten emulating him. Cage main, success, he said tonelessly. Tenten fell back down to the ground and landed improperly, due to her legs still being under Shikamaru's control. How? She yelled from her position on the arena floor. She still had a shuriken to her throat. Their shadows might be so small as to be nearly invisible, but ninja wire still casts some, as minimal as it is, Shikamaru explained. Every time you were sending a weapon at me, you were giving me a direct line to your shadow. After that, the only thing I needed to do was grab one of your weapons, and you were done. He waved the kunai he still held. Now, will you surrender or do we need to continue? The kunoichi grit her teeth. I surrender, she spat out, clearly unhappy with the results. Winner, Nara Shikamaru. The proctor confirmed. Well, you were right about short, Fumichi said. That's difficult to beat in terms of length. Hi. Ariko replied. She'd personally thought long, and something completely different than what happened. She'd actually seen Shikamaru running, and that was something she'd not thought possible. The Nara tricking his opponent, for sure, but she hadn't expected Shikamaru to do something that could actually make him sweat. She'd thought he'd surrender before something like that happened. Now's the Aburaim against the girl from Sand, correct? Asano asked Nishi, who'd taken back her schedule. Hi, the girl said. That fight started barely a minute later, and the best way to describe it would be keep away. The two combatants had put a long distance between the two of them, and they traded pot shots. On the Suna girl's side, she sent wave after wave of wind at the Aburaim, Shino, she now remembered, at best hitting a bug clone. Her opponent replied with kunai and shuriken, sometimes with explosive tags, but she deflected them handily. This one is gonna be long, Mihoshi whined. Everyone nodded in agreement, even her mother. And it was. That stalemate lasted for a good 15, 20 minutes, at which moment the wind mistress fell to her knees. How? She yelled, and everyone in the arena could hear her. You were under an illusion for the entire match, Shino replied, face blank. Why did you not notice, you ask? Because the illusion didn't hide anything at first. While we were trading attacks, I sent small numbers of my bugs forward, hidden under the genjutsu. You were slowly being drained of your chakra. Damn you! She cried, swiping her fan forward. Nothing happened. My bugs have drained every last bit of your reserves, and you sent the rest at me uselessly, the Aburaim continued. That was my trump card, and you didn't notice it until it was too late. Damn, she started, trying to move forward. She then fell flat on her face, unconscious. Winner, Aburaim Shino, the referee said, while said ninja bowed to the audience. There weren't that many cheers, not with how long the fight had been, but there was still some. Rigid clapping, along with a buzzing of some kind, came from the region the Aburaim clan was seated in. You go Shino! Naruto yelled. It had taken Iruka reminding him of the Aburaim's seat in class before he remembered who he was. That made 3 members of his last class to pass, and none eliminated yet. A good battle, Iruka confirmed. You saw how he did that. He tricked her, Naruto answered. Actually, they all did. They created a way to win and took it. Yes, the teacher confirmed. They used tactics to give themselves a path to victory. That's the way it mainly goes in shinobi battles. The one who outplans his adversary is generally the winner. The big blasting techniques are nice, but often a single knife is enough, if used at the right moment. Then why are the best-known ninja the powerful ones, instead of the brightest ones and the like? Naruto asked, curious. Because there are also big defenses, and sometimes you need to punch through them, Iruka explained. Also, the bigger attack techniques tend to be widespread, and do damage to more than a single person. Even if half the enemy army dodges or survives your technique, that's still one half you no longer have to deal with. So every technique has its moment, Naruto summarized. Correct, the teacher said with a smile and a nod. If there's one thing you should remember of this tournament, it is that. Even powerful techniques have weaknesses, and if they get turned against you the dangers are just greater. He shook his head. Anyway, if you want to see a match of power, look no further. He pointed down at the arena. The 4th and last match of the first round. Sabaku no Gaara against Rock Lee. The proctor yelled. That's gonna be a power match? Naruto inquired. Rock Lee is a taijutsu-only ninja, the Chunin explained. He's a brute stronger and faster than a lot of jonin. He's not stupid and he studies hard, but he really has only a single tool, hitting something harder. And from what I understand, sand manipulation is the only thing Gaara can do, though he is deadly about it. It's going to be fist against sand, and the strongest will probably win. Begin, the referee said. At the very second, Lee dashed back, clearing 10 meters easily before turning back toward Gaara. Mother wants your blood, Gaara screamed, and a wave of sand rose in front of him, growing as it went toward Lee. The boy didn't seem scared. Kaimon, Kumon, Simon, Shuman, Tommen, came on, the boy invoked clearly. Kai. By then, the wave was barely a meter away. Morning Peacock. Lee disappeared right there as the wave fell where he'd been. Tracking his movement wasn't difficult, as he left a trail of flames on the ground. He appeared right inside Gaara's guard, instantly kicking the Suna boy straight in the air. The blow resonated all over the arena. But that wasn't all. The taijutsu master reappeared beside his foe at the apex of his uncontrolled flight. There, he started punching Gaara repeatedly, fire blossoming on his arms as he did so. Naruto turned to his teacher. But you just told me he didn't use ninjutsu? He said. That's not ninjutsu, the Chunin confirmed. That's pure taijutsu, pure speed. He's going fast enough that the friction from the very air starts fires. Iruka had never seen the technique, but had heard about it. And performed by a genin no less? Those who said Lee wasn't a genius in his own right should have stayed quiet. Naruto said nothing, eyes wide. A final haymaker finally sent Gaara back down, pushing him at least a meter deep in the arena floor. The Konoha genin then followed the boy back down, pulling him back out of the floor, as if to continue the battle. But it wasn't Gaara who came out. It was a formless mass of sand, slowly growing, halfway covering the boy. An arm of sand went straight at Lee, but he kicked the creature off, straight into one of the arena walls. By the way Gaara was screaming, he clearly wasn't in control of whatever that creature was. And at that time, everything happened instantly. Feathers appeared everywhere in the stadium, twirling hypnotically in the air. A single look nearly sent Naruto asleep, but a command from Iruka still came through. Surge your chakra, as strong as you can, now, the teacher yelled. Groggy, he still did as told. Iruka had a good reason for whatever he asked, most of the time. He pushed out a wave of chakra as strong as he could, and the grogginess disappeared instantly as did the feathers. An illusion, he now realized. Shaking his head, Naruto had a look around. There was fighting right in the stands, disguises falling off to reveal ninjas underneath. Most of them had the sand hourglass there, but a good number had the sound music note instead. He then dodged a thrown shuriken. That cleared his mind. Iruka, beside him, threw a kunai straight in a sound ninja's eyes. This wasn't the time to hold back. As much as he wanted the fact that he could perform the shadow clone technique to be a secret, he wanted his village safe infinitely more. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he yelled, filling every open space within 20 meters with a clone. They all jumped into action, rushing at the invading ninja. They died in droves, but better them than Konoha villagers. And he wasn't done. Kuchios no Jutsu, Monty, he yelled, slamming his hands on the ground. He'd have gone with the leader, but he still wasn't certain to manage it on the first try. And Miyamoto had said that Monty was the rabbit who liked battle the most. The tiny white rabbit appeared right between his hands. Naruto didn't waste any time. Hourglass music note, he said, pointing on his brow where the usual ninja headband resided. They go down. Go! Monty vanished. Half a second later, the sand ninja who'd been about to stab Iruka in the back lost his neck with a quick pop as the only clue to Monty's passage. The invasion had just begun. Chapter 18 Invasion. Prank Day 110 Last stage of the Chunin exam. Kai! Muramaru woke up instantly as his mentor's chakra washed over him. For a second, he didn't know who he was supposed to be or where he was, but then his memories caught up, and he remembered what had happened. The genjutsu. Jumping to his feet, Muramaru thanked whoever was listening that the Naruto clones were made more solidly than normal Kage Bunshin. Vanishing right now would have been the worst way for Kuritori to learn about the prank. The clone then dodged to the side as a burst of wind shattered the seat he'd been on, then crouched under a wave of shuriken. Sensei, he yelled, drawing a set of kunai and throwing them right at the three shinobi fighting Kuritori. Two dodged backwards while the third blocked, and the teacher used the opening to cut the man's leg off at the ankle using his own foot. Leave! Kuritori yelled, pushing aside the first sand ninja's sword strike. This is no place for a student. Withdraw to the shelters immediately. Like hell he was. He was a clone, so he wasn't risking anything by staying and fighting. He wasn't going to take someone else's spot and hide. I can fight, he yelled back, reaching for more kunai. No, he said, jumping back. He then pushed Muramaru out of the way, taking a Saban in the shoulder at the same time. It would have hit Muramaru, and he hadn't even noticed it. I am your master, and this is an order, the Chunin said, ripping out the Saban with one hand while disarming the second sand ninja with his foot. Leave! I can pee. Muramaru started, only to stop as Kuratori put his foot at the clone's belly, making it stick there. He then wound up for a kick, and released Muramaru at full extension. The false academy student sailed in the air for a second, managing to land properly using the tree walking technique. He'd landed only a meter or so from an exit, and his master could no longer be seen with all the fighting that was going on. His face tensed as he dashed through the exit. He wasn't going to get in Kuratori's way, but he wasn't going run either. This was Konoha, his precious village, and he was going to fight to the death to protect it. Pain was what woke her up. Ariko's hand instinctively reached for her hurt ear, only to find Ichibo there. Why did he bite me? She wondered. He'd mostly been silent during the entire tournament, so she had no clue what could have made him do something like that. Then the last few minutes came back to her, and she shot up in a flash. Up quick! Mihoshi yelled beside her, slapping Ringo awake. You two are the last, she told them. Ariko quickly looked around. There was fighting all around her, and a wall of earth rose beside them, cutting them off from a trio of sound ninja. She quickly realized what had happened, and reminded herself to thank Naruto for making his clones this resistant. She then snapped her left thumb and pinky together, a thank you to the bunny who'd taken back his spot on the top of her head. My pleasure, Ichibo quickly messaged back with a trio of thumps. Everyone, to the exit! Mitoto yelled, throwing a pair of kunai at the ninja who'd just tried climbing over her earth wall she just summoned. We need to get to the shelters, quick! Mihoshi started handing everyone shuriken. Ariko shook her head, withdrawing her own. As a Naruto clone in the academy, she'd made sure she was always fully equipped. Especially in throwing weapons, which was her official specialty. Their region of the area seemed to have less combat than the others, and as such the group had no difficulty reaching one of the exits. Look behind, Ichibo messaged as the Bunshin was about to enter one of the exits. Ariko did so, and saw Lee there with a pair of jonin, keeping whatever Gaara became busy. The boy clearly had seen better days, and was breathing quite hard, but still fought with all the power he had before. Ariko had a new appreciation of taijutsu at the sight. Following Mitoto, the Konoha fashion ninja ran straight out the building. Only a single enemy interrupted their course, but with Fumichi and Nishi backing Mitoto, the lonely sound ninja was barely a speed bump. And then they were outside. It wasn't much better. There was fighting all over the place, and with the wider spaces bigger techniques could be heard or seen all over. A trio of giant snakes had broken through the wall, and were slowly going straight for the Hokage Tower, destroying everything in their path. Doton, Dorihiki! Mitoto yelled. A wall appeared right in the middle of the street, blocking a giant wind blast coming from a shinobi in the rooftops. The ninja didn't wait, jumping down to the side to get a new line of attack. He never got it. Gutsuga! Kiba yelled, coming out of an alley spinning like a drill. The sound shinobi, in midair, couldn't dodge, and was hit severely before falling further down the road. He didn't get up. Other genin from his former class made their way out of the alley, along with a number of civilians. Shino, Shikamaru, Ino and Choji joined Kiba while keeping an eye on their surroundings. You are escorting civilians to the shelter, right? Mitoto asked. Right, Mom, Kiba answered with a slightly lecherous smirk. Mitoto ignored the look. Girls, you go with them, she ordered, turning toward the Konoha fashion ninja. Keep together, protect each other. I'm going to see if I can help in the arena. She dashed back in. The group joined the genin and the civilians, Ariko hanging at the back. The rest were holding each other close out of fear and apprehension. Ariko would have liked to help, but her current mental state wouldn't help. Ariko didn't feel those emotions. She felt rage. The idea of her village being attacked was filling her with desire to hit something, to kill the invaders. As soon as she wasn't being looked at, she used a quick kawarimi to appear on a rooftop a mile away. She wasn't going to hide in a shelter, even if the rest of her group needed her. She was sorry about abandoning them, but Konoha needed her more. She was going to hunt. And judging by the message Ichigo had just sent, her passenger was in perfect agreement. Neither Naruto nor his two fake personas had thought of sending an update. As such, it was the death of the first clone, followed by the death of many other clones, that revealed to the Bunshins in the Uruhara basement that the village was being invaded. There were hundreds of clones there, training, resting, reading, planning, eating and doing multitudes of other activities. Whatever they were doing, the moment the first Bunshin died they turned in the direction of the arena like a wave, all eyes growing wide. Then the war cries started. "Ora!" A copy screamed, and everyone picked it up. They all rushed toward the exit leading to the arena, hands reaching for weapons. "Stop!" a clone yelled, his voice somehow overriding the great cry. Everyone turned to see a clone, one of the members of the Naruto Council, standing at the spot the Rio 1 normally occupied. "What?" Dozens of clones yelled at him. "We all go out like this, the prank is done," he yelled back. "That many clones all at once? Nobody'll be fooled anymore. They'll check everything, and we'll be finished." "You can't be telling us to let this happen?" a clone replied. "You crazy? Coward!" "I'm going anyway," another said, and many nodded along. "I've got an idea!" one yelled over everyone. He'd been clearly heard, and everyone turned toward him. He did a single ram seal, and took on another shape. It wasn't a form they'd taken previously, but it was perfect for the situation. The council member laughed, doing his own ram seal. "That's exactly what we need. Everyone, follow that example." He then sent an update as soon as he changed shape, in case some hadn't heard. There was a tsunami of ram seals as everyone took on a new look. The clones weren't exactly similar, though they all followed the same pattern, which was the very thing what was required. "Now everyone," the council member said. "Create as many clones as you can that are able to fight properly." A series of nods answered him, along with cross seals. "I want half the people here to stay behind, the rest splitting up along the many exits in Konoha." "Why?" one asked. "In case anywhere needs backup," he yelled back. "I need people to get real weapons out, and the map. We need to be ready for anything that could happen. Get the tags out, and start handing them out." All the Bunshins jumped into action. Waves of clones rushed every exit, nearly stepping over each other in their haste. Even the ceilings were filled with copies rushing out. Things went better as the paths split as clones went every way. The attackers better be ready. The clones were coming. Hinata had been in the infirmary, explaining how her blinding technique worked to the medics there, when the first sound ninja got in, weapons drawn. With the many ninja in the room, he didn't get far, but after the third nearly managed a fireball into the crowded room, it was clear something needed to be done. With everyone there, Hinata couldn't fight at her fullest potential. She looked around as the medics started arguing about what to do, whether to evacuate or stand here. One of them sealed the room, but that wouldn't hold forever, minutes at most. Activating her Byakugan, she looked around. There were side rooms attached in the corners, made for ninja who needed to be separated from the rest. With what little combat there had been, they were all empty. With the training she just went through, calculating sizes and dimensions came easy, and she quickly had a plan. "Everyone, to the side rooms," she yelled. The medics turned to her. "Are you crazy? We'll never be able to fight in there." She took a deep breath. She would do it. "You won't need to," she answered clearly, looking straight at who she thought was the lead medic, right in the eyes. "I'll stay here, and make sure no one gets past this room. I'll fill it with enough steel to make sure no one makes it out." But one medic said, "Go!" Hinata yelled, reaching out in her pockets for her pills. "There's no time. Your medics, you take care of the wounded." Along with the two defeated Leaf Genin, there was a trio of wounded Leaf Ninja. "I'll be defending you." Nobody argued. Some tried cowing her, but her Byakugan eyes were still active, and as such no one could outstare her. "Take the beds, the cabinets, everything. Give me the most room I can have," she yelled. "And take care of my cousin," she added in a lower voice. Regardless of what he might have tried, he was still family. It took a good 2 minutes before the enemy ninja managed to unseal the door, and by that time Hinata was dancing in the middle of a meat grinder, twisting unharmed as steel flew all around her. The first 3 ninjas who entered didn't even have the time to yell before falling to pieces, and the ones following managed to retreat, wounded all over. By the 4th wave, there were enough dead ninjas around the door that the sand and sound shinobi had to jump over the corpses of their allies to gain entrance. Meanwhile, Hinata took a second soldier pill as she spun. None were going to pass, not while she lived. She didn't notice, but along the many dead sound and sand, there was a duo of cloud ninja who'd hoped to capture her alive. They hadn't made it past the door. Like many leaf ninja, Ryukatsujoji was following the Chunin exam on the radio while hanging at a bar. There was even some betting going around, and he was glad that the odds on the Hyuga heiress victory had been good enough to tempt him. He'd made more than enough to pay for whatever he drank today. Then enemy ninjas started appearing everywhere, and it all went to hell. There had been enough Konoha shinobi in the bar that they'd managed to push back the first attack, but they'd already taken losses. 2 of their number, other Chunin, were severely wounded, and 4 more had lesser wounds. He passed through undamaged, but at the rhythm things were going it was only a matter of time. As another sand group reared their head, everyone acted. He tried trapping the whole group in a genjutsu, illusionary hands made out of spikes rising from every surface while those in the air were buffeted by fiery ducks, but half the group ignored it. The others tried dodging, but as he'd planned they fell in the paths of the others' attacks. One of the surviving ninja charged him, and everyone else was busy. He tried a second illusion, opening a false pit in the ground, filled with snakes, wolves and ducks, but the man broke through easily. Then Joji was gone, appearing on a rooftop 20 meters from the action. What? The Konoha ninja said. He hadn't done that. He couldn't yet manage a shushin outside a calm situation. Looking down, he saw that he'd not been the only one who'd changed places. The road in front of the bar was now filled with ninja he'd never seen before instead of his fellow barhoppers. They looked at first glance like A and BU, but there were clear differences. Gone were the animal masks, and instead there were the most bizarre sets of colors and designs on the shinobi's faces. One even had a giant star, purple on yellow, painted right at nose level. Not only that, but each had distinctive hairstyles and bright shades, a powder blue mohawk here, a flowing rainbow there. The ninja who'd taken his place was just as visible, having 2 twirling lime green horns rising from the front of his puce mask and 3 bright pink pigtails hanging from the back. The sand ninja who'd been charging him didn't hesitate, continuing on to strike at his new target. The bizarre Anbu blocked the sword strike with his bare arm, only for the sand shinobi to reach out with his other hand and grab the pink-haired man by the throat. Then the sand ninja screamed, clearly being electrocuted. A second later, the horned Anbu was gone, and the sand shinobi was smoking and twitching on the ground. Around him, the rest of the group was in a similar state. Those that weren't dead were either clearly wounded or blind, judging by their actions, and more of those weird ninja were standing over them with glowing hands at their backs. Taking his eyes off the road, he realized these ninja were everywhere. He could see some running on walls, sniping at people from rooftops, and jumping straight into the action. Hundreds of them, all over the place. A trio of them at a crossroad went back to back, and a tornado formed around them. Well, he thought as he took a deep breath, he couldn't let them do all the work. Forming hand seals, he focused on a charging sound shinobi, and a wave of illusionary flames surged out of the alleys to rush at that invader. The enemy instantly turned back and ran the other way, not realizing he was going straight toward a spinning whirlwind. Bright eyes appeared on the flaming wave, followed by a giant bill and burning wings. Luckily the shinobi did not turn back, else he might have started disbelieving the illusion. A second later, he was taken and launched by the raging winds. Joji sighed, letting the illusion drop. He really needed to do something about that fear of his. Damn! Kyuha said as another memory flashed before his eyes. He didn't have a name before today, but after he'd taken command of the Naruto Bunshin's counterattack, one had been given to him by the mass. With everyone who had something to say to him, he needed it. He was swearing because the group had just lost another score of clones. Worst was, they'd died without having any effect, trying to drain the 3 massive snakes that were doing urban remodeling of the village. He turned to the massive number of clones that were waiting for orders. Anyone have an idea how to deal with those giant snakes? Anyone? There was a moment of silence. You've got a heavy firepower team right here, if you need it, someone finally said from deeper in the room. Clones moved, and 6 Narutos came forward, each with a black sphere in their hands. Konoha dropped right in front of them and scowled. We already tried those, and they don't work well enough. What's so different with the ones you got? He brought the hand holding the sphere in front of him. Mine is 70 days of fire chakra in a ball. The others are around the same. The clone whistled as his eyes widened, then grinned. That might just work. It's just the kind of thing we need right now. He turned to the mass of waiting bunshins. I need 50 clones to go with 3 of these guys. Some of those waiting instantly took disguises while stepping forward. 3? Jigaku, the clone leading those maintaining those balls, asked. Konoha turned to the maintainers. 3 now, 3 as backup if anything goes wrong. We don't know if there are other summons like that waiting in the wings, and you people can't be replaced easily. The clones nodded. Jigaku pointed at 2 others in his team, then toward the exits. Then he dashed, and dozens of clones followed. They made their way up in record time, those already in the tunnels themselves moving to give passage. The 3 maintainers arrived at ground level to see desolation. Large numbers of the Naruto clones were engaging the 3 snakes in battle. They had no choice, as the sand and sound ninja were using their presence to their advantage, acting as both cover and distraction. While the clones hadn't managed to inflict much noticeable damage to the summons, they had at least managed to keep them somewhat in place. And it was the village itself who suffered. In a circle a few hundred meters in diameter, no building was still standing. Crumbled houses and warehouses dotted the landscape, offering little protection to the ninjas on the ground. Left. Right. His 2 partners yelled, dashing in their respective directions. That leaves me with the center one, Jigaku thought. It was the least damaged of the 3, and the closest to a squad of defending sound ninja. He moved forward slowly, the 15 or so other clones around him spreading out protectively. Now, how to attack? The maintainer wondered. The head was the most valid target, but it was dozens of meters from the ground with no rooftop in range. A Kawarimi might get him up there, but he'd be in freefall if he missed. As he looked for a plan, his target swiped his tail in a circle on the ground, forcing a trio of Konoha ninja hiding behind a junk pile to dodge. One of the 3 jumped straight up, clearing the tail easily, only for the snake's head to lunge forward, mouth open for a quick snack. Jigaku saw the opening and reacted instantly. His hand did a single snake seal, switching with the jumping ninja a bare second before the summon's jaws closed down. He didn't even have the time to release the sphere before being dispersed by the snake's fangs. Not that it made much difference. Only a single second after Jakoga's disappearance, the sphere destabilized and burst, sending the enormous amounts of heat it contained in every direction. The snake's head cooked instantly from the inside, turning into a 10-meter wide ball of blazing flames. The 2 other maintainers saw their boss technique and copied it, and not a minute later there were 3 small suns burning inside Konoha's walls. The extreme heat quickly turned the neighborhood's climate into one similar to a desert. Fighting stopped for a moment, as everyone turned toward the spheres of fire still hanging in the air, not comprehending if such a thing could happen. Everyone but the Naruto clones, that is. They knew what had just occurred, and they took advantage of the opportunity. They charged forward, jumping straight through the sand and sound defenses while the moment lasted. Surprised and deprived of their giant defenders, the invading forces were quickly pushed back toward the wall. And there were more clones waiting for them there. The first wave of bunshins that had been sent as backup had a specific target: the stadium. As clones got burst, Konoha and his team of dispatchers had frequent updates of the situation in the village. The situation was slowly but surely improving everywhere the clones had eyes, except in one place. In the arena proper. Gaara was there, still fighting Lee along with a pair of jonin who joined in. Unfortunately, as time passed, it was clear they weren't having an effect on the growing sand monster. Worse, Lee was quickly tiring, and it was up to anyone's guess what would happen should he fall. As such, 400 or so clones were sent to defeat or delay whatever that monster was. By now, Gaara was completely covered in sand and invisible. The reinforcements arrived just in time. One of the jonin had just grabbed the fallen Lee and retreated, leaving only a single Konoha ninja in the arena itself. First wave, go! The leading bunshin yelled, and 40 clones surged forward. Some jumped directly at the sand beast, trying to electrocute it to death, while 2 appeared right in front of the jonin to defend him. Said clones died instantly as the monster shot a giant ball of wind and sand forward. The Jonin dodged in the stands, retreating. The leader took a moment to make sure the situation in the stands was stable, then turned back to the middle of the stadium. More than half the clones there had already perished without doing much. Lightning didn't seem to harm it, and whatever black spheres they tried quickly burst from all the flying sand. Blinding didn't seem to have any effect, as did a dozen linked explosive tags. Any other idea? He asked, looking at his subordinates. There was no answers. Second wave, go! He ordered, and 40 clones surged forward. They didn't have a plan to take it down, but keeping it occupied would have to be enough. The sand beast reacted instantly to the new arrivals, swiping one of his arms at the approaching squad. Most of the clones there used kawarimi to land safely, but one of those in the front had another idea. Suetun, Tapa Nami Kyoha, said Bunshin yelled, disappearing as a lance of water surged forward. The surge struck the beast's incoming hand, quickly turning the sand into mud. 4 fingers fell a second later, the monster's hand no longer supporting them. You saw that, right? A Bunshin said right beside him. Water clearly worked, even if Tapanami Kyoha was supposed to be a defensive technique. Everyone down there, the leader ordered. I want 5 clones making those lances every second. We'll hammer that construct until we get to the guy in the middle. Yash! The clones yelled, surging forward. Hose after hose started lancing toward the beast, who slowly lost layer after layer. It took a good 30 seconds before Gaara became visible, and the sand construct crumbled after the sand genin was hosed a few more times. What do we do with him now? One of the clones said as Gaara choked and tried rising from the arena floor. Kill him? He was clearly not looking forward to such a choice. The leader didn't like that option either. He had memories of Lee's battle, and wasn't even sure if Gaara had done this on purpose. It looked more like he'd lost control of something. He thought for a few seconds. No, he finally said. We blind him, drain him, keep him wet. We'll put him in one of the basement pools, see if that stops his sand. Said sand was still trying to surround the boy, and every 30 or so seconds another clone had to drench him once more. We'll leave the decision to the boss. Hi. The 50 or so clones left around him answered, and 5 of them reached out to the genin. It took barely a minute before the boy was bound and blind, and 5 before the group was back in the tunnels with their captive. The Iruka tunnels did not only lead inside Konoha. Near half the exits were outside the village walls. Compared to those in the village, they'd seen very little use, as only the jumpers came in and out that way. Until now. Dozens of Kage Bunshins poured from every exit to the east of the village. The enemy force's entry point had been tracked there, and the clones weren't going to let them have it easy. The sand and sound forces had separate camps, close to but still some distance from each other. The sound camp was nearly empty, as they'd sent all their forces inside, leaving only the 3 snake summoners along with a few guards, those being the weakest of the sound troops. They were overwhelmed instantly. The sand forces were more professional. They had scouts, guards, doctors, and reinforcements in good order. They were prepared for just about anything. The surging clones still hit them like hammer. It wasn't an instant victory like the sound camp, but it quickly became evident where the wind was blowing. Most of the elite sand ninja were inside the village proper, and what was left weren't expecting a large force right at their backs. Worse, it seemed like every single enemy was a clone, which meant that the sand forces were wasting their energies and losing troops without even inflicting adequate losses in return. They were slowly being pushed back toward Konoha, which meant that they'd either have to enter the village proper or be surrounded with their back to the wall. And neither option seemed survivable. Otoke sent another wide blade of wind forward, bursting 6 or so clones. 3 managed to jump over the attack, and were pelted with wind attacks and shuriken from the other ninjas standing behind him. The hole he'd created filled in less than 5 seconds, more ninja clones again, appearing to push forward once more. He had a quick look around, managing to catch Yura being blinded then overwhelmed. 2 genin and a chunin broke ranks to help him, but more of those bizarre ninjas intercepted them. He was now the lead remaining jonin. He made some quick maths in his head. The support forces had already lost more than half their numbers, along with numerous wounded still left on the ground. What little news they had of the situation in the village wasn't pointing toward victory, more like the same thing as here. It was clear. They'd lost. They'd thought the leaf weak, but it had only been an act. It was clear they'd been prepared for the invasion. Therefore, as a loyal sand ninja, Otoke's had only a single option. Stop! He yelled. Sand forces, stand down! It took a moment, but the fighting slowed then stopped. Surprisingly, the Konoha shinobi in those weird masks also stopped, though still keeping ready for combat. He'd been prepared if they tried to profit from the opening, but they hadn't. There was no visible leader, so he turned to the clone right before him. Who speaks for your group? The ninja said nothing, clapping his hands and snapping his fingers in various ways. He then disappeared, another clone having taken his place. This one had spiky hair going from yellow to red as it rose, along with a rainbow crown. His mask was half green and half red, cut diagonally, and he had a visibly fake bushy beard. Talk, he said in a gruff voice. I would negotiate the Sand Force's surrender, Otoke said, gritting his teeth. He hated what he was doing, but he had no other choice. If the Sand Forces here didn't return at all, Sunagakure was done. There were small clans and lesser villages who wouldn't miss the opportunity, so he needed to preserve whatever Sand Forces he could. The Crown Ninja made more of these bizarre head signs. Drop weapons. You'll be bound and blinded, then led to separate holding points, he then explained. Otoke's gulped. How about are wounded? The Konoha ninja looked around. There were more than 20 fallen sand ninja in sight, and more hidden being the mass of Konoha shinobi. Who are your medics? Sand medics, raise hands. Otoke's ordered, and about a dozen hands went up. The shinobi opposite him nodded. 5 guards to each medic. Everyone healed is to be bound and blinded. We'll let the medics work as soon as everyone else is secured. Ninja behind him started moving, 5 for each medical ninja. I accept your terms, the Sand Jonin said, reaching down. He unclipped his belt, letting it drop, then pushed both his hands together toward the man in front of him. It was better terms than what he expected. Most villages would have left the wounded to die, if they hadn't finished them off right then. Konoha today had proved its reputation handily. It was the strongest, and still the most decent. More of the bizarrely masked ninja stepped forward, and the sand troops quickly disarmed and capitulated. Many had friends or allies wounded or bleeding on the ground, and everyone wanted them healed as quickly as possible. Go, go, go! Muramaru yelled at a trio of women being accompanied by 4 Narutos, shadow clones, evidently. The whole group dashed through the exit he was protecting, quickly disappearing in the street. That's what he'd done for the past few minutes as the various fights wound down. He'd kept this particular exit safe and covered for whatever civilians and wounded Leaf Ninja were using it. He'd thought about joining the various fights going on, but there were already numerous clones going around, and he didn't think he'd be of much help. Looking around, he saw that his posting was no longer needed. The stands were now clear of civilians from his point of view, and the battles remaining seemed under control. Kuratori was also nowhere in sight, and the region they'd been seated in was empty. Time to find another place to help, then. He walked out of the arena using the same exit he'd kept clear. He found the street before the stadium safe and patrolled by disguised bunshins. There wasn't anything here for him to do. But he could get a better view of the situation. Just the other side of the road from the stadium was an apartment building, 7 floors high. It was perfect to scan a large percentage of the village from one point. He ran straight up the wall, mentally thanking his teacher once more for this technique. Incoming ally! A voice said above as he cleared the second-to-last floor, and Muramaru recognized it as Ichibo after a second's thought. The male clone arrived on top to find Ariko crouched on one of the corners of the roof, kunais with tags planted all around her. She gave him a quick look before turning back toward the streets. Good work down there, Muramaru, she said. You saw? I've been here nearly since I escaped the stadium, she explained. I've gotten a good look at how everything's going. 2 targets. Ichibo called out. 40 degrees, 800 meters. Got them, the female clone replied. In a flash, 2 kunai disappeared from the ground, sent in the direction of the 2 enemies. Judging by the lack of sound, Ariko was using one of the techniques attached to the matsuri on the weapon she threw. A pair of muffled booms then rang in the distance. She clearly had the area under control. Anywhere that could use my help? Muramaru asked. Ariko shook her head. Not really. Fighting's dying down everywhere I know of, and cleanup's all that's left. There's only real fighting in a single spot, really. Which is? Ariko said nothing, only pointed straight north. Muramaru thought she meant the arena, but then he saw the purple cage on the roof above the Kage seats. What is that? No clue, the female academy student answered. It was there when I arrived here. On thing is sure, thought. Her face went serious. The Hokage's inside. Gigi? Muramaru replied. He wouldn't have used the term normally, being reserved to the real Naruto, but the surprise had brought it out. Ariko simply nodded. Naruto's on his way, Ichigo then added, pointing down. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto yelled. 100 or so clones popped all around him, reinforcing the few ninjas still fighting. That was what Naruto had done for most of the invasion. He'd stood to the side and sent wave after wave of Bunshins. Sure, he could fight, but he was of more help generating more and more clones. By now, the arena was nearly empty, and his clones were finishing the last few battles. Iruka was long gone, the teacher having escorted a group of nobles out of the stadium, and Monty was around somewhere out of sight. Time to check on Gigi then? He'd not paid attention to what had happened in the Kage's box, having more urgent issues to deal with. Gigi was the strongest in the village, he could take care of himself. But he was the best person to report to for orders. He wasn't even halfway to said seats when he noticed the purple walls on the arena roof. He didn't like the looks of that. A second look showed a NBU stationed around it, so he went up there. He landed barely 3 meters from the wall, and was about to go closer when an ANBU intercepted him. Be careful, Uzumaki-sen, the ANBU warned with a female voice. Weapons thrown there turned to mist instantly, and another ninja had to be amputated after simply grazing this curtain. Naruto nodded. No worries, he replied and made a cross seal. A second later, a dozen copies appeared around him. He turned to the closest. You know what to do. The Bunshin nodded, and charged. For Konoha! He yelled, ramming the barrier head first. He disappeared instantly on touch, his few seconds of memories rushing back to the many Narutos. Fire, the real Uzumaki voiced, and then he smiled. Fire, both Muramaru and Ariko voiced from the rooftop they occupied. The male copy instantly got what Naruto was going to do. He turned to his female compatriot. Throw me. What? Toss me on the stadium roof. He cried out. I can help down there. But, Ariko started. She didn't have the time to say anything else. Muramaru did a single hand seal and transformed into a javelin. In that form, it wasn't like he could answer her. She grabbed her fellow clone and took aim. She wasn't the best with this kind of weapon, but she didn't need exact precision for this throw. As long as she didn't miss the roof or hit this purple cage, everything was fine. Turn back after 300 meters, she said. And then she threw. She then grabbed as many kunai as she could hold in her hands and waited. Muramaru wasn't the only one who expected the cage to come crashing down. Looking back at his clones, Naruto knew they had the same idea he'd had. He nodded. Katan Akaraka Jugoki. He invoked, his copies in perfect synchronization with him. Naruto threw his own sphere, while the clones around him rushed the barrier, balls first. The 4 violet flames formation was a barrier that reacted by incinerating anything that came in contact with it. It had, however, no contingency for techniques that fed on flames. As soon as the first sphere made contact, the chakra requirements of the barrier doubled. Then tripled, quadrupled, quintupled as more balls came in contact. By the 7th, the Sound 4 were tittering on the edge of unconsciousness. Naruto and his clones had made 12 spheres in total. The barrier vanished in a flash, and everything happened instantly. The charging clones cleared the area where the barrier had been and continued on. A pair found themselves rushing trees, and could not stop fast enough. Their spheres burst, incinerating said trees on the spot. One clone managed to redirect his ball toward a falling Sound ninja. On contact, both clone and ninja turned to smoke as flames consumed them. Muramaru turned back to human form scant meters from the rooftop, unseen by everyone who was focusing on the fallen cage. He redirected his momentum with a kick, and charged for the trees. Naruto's sphere had continued on unimpaired, and found itself on a direct path with an unknown gray-eyed ninja with a Konoha headband. It didn't reach him, as the ninja made a single one-handed seal and sent a dense surge of water to intercept the sphere. Naruto recognized the technique, being one he had learned, and as such, the ninja using it. How had the second Hokage returned? The contact between ball and water released an enormous wave of hot steam, hiding the gray-eyed ninja from sight, along with a good part of the battlefield. But not from above. Iruka had a clear lane of fire on all the ninja formerly in the cage. The Hokage was easy to recognize, the giant staff in his hands being a big clue. She quickly sent everything she had at the three others. Orochimaru was the only one to dodge, the two others not even reacting as they exploded. The snake Sannin landed on top of one of the trees to have a good look at what was happening. The ANBU hadn't expected Naruto to bring the barrier down, and were caught flat-footed. It took a few seconds before the rushed en masse. By that time, Naruto had just generated a second group of clones, 100 strong this time. With clones and ANBU rushing his position, Orochimaru realized his battle against his teacher was done. While individually the ANBU weren't a danger, he couldn't fight them all along with his sensei. Still, that didn't mean he couldn't get a last hit in. A single hand seal from the snake Sannin whipped the steam at the Hokage to blind him, then threw his sword straight at his foe while he saw nothing. He then followed with a great breakthrough to give himself space and blow back the many weapons coming at him. Muramura saw the snake Sannin's sword flying straight for Sarutobi, and reacted instantly. He jumped to the side toward the weapon and, as he'd been taught, slapped his arm parallel to the blade and glued it there. He then glued his feet to the ground. The sword nearly wrenched his arm off, but Muramura released his hold before he could be dispelled by the force. He'd at least redirected the sword somewhat, and the blade found itself embedded in a tree half a meter to Sarutobi's side. Orochimaru hadn't left yet, hoping to see the result of his last strike. Scowling, he did another blast of wind to make space, killing a pair of clones easily with his other hand. He then lost said hand at the elbow. Monty had been waiting for his opening, and the snake ninja had finally given him one. Now inside his guard, the rabbit bounced of his other arm, severing it in the process, and rushed for his foe's neck. He was only a second too late. Another Orochimaru slithered out of the first's mouth, and the body left behind exploded. The Sannin didn't wait this time, vanishing in a shushin. Some of the ANBU quickly gave chase while others concentrated on keeping down the two ninja the Sannin had summoned, the many clones helping the latter. Naruto took a last look around, then sat down for a breath, realizing he'd been fighting non-stop for at least an hour. The battles were finally done. The invasion was over. Chapter 19, Debriefing. Prank Day 110. Last stage of the Chunin exam. Muramura, much like his creator, fell to his knees as soon as the fighting was done. He hadn't been using Jutsu relentlessly like the real Naruto, but it was still the first time he fought for real using the sharp fist. He still had a twinge in his arm from redirecting Orochimaru's sword, and he knew he'd need a good few hours of chakra draining to be back to full efficiency as soon as he was alone. He sat there, panting for a good few minutes when an ANBU member appeared close to him on the rooftop. Said ninja looked around until his eyes fell on the clone. "You are Muramura, correct?" the ANBU member asked. Muramura simply nodded. "You are required urgently at the hospital," the ANBU said. He then reached with a single hand and grabbed the copy by the shoulder. "What?" Muramura started, only to find himself instantly transported to an empty room inside Konoha General Hospital. The ANBU did not let go, dragging him through corridors and stairwells. The clone had no idea where they were going. Clones did not get sick or hurt, and Naruto hadn't been sent there the few times he'd gotten seriously wounded. And he couldn't see why he would be needed here. The ANBU finally stopped beside an open door, releasing him. "Please go inside, Muramura-san." He might have been mistaken, but he thought for an instant that he could detect a note of sadness in the ANBU's voice. He went in. There were 3 different medics around a single bed, and he could see 2 pairs of glowing hands on the chest of the person resting there. There wasn't much skin that could be seen on the patient, so Muramura had no idea who he was. "He's here," one of the medics said. There was a slight movement. "Muramura, come here," a wheezy voice rasped, clearly coming from the wounded ninja. It took a moment for Muramura to recognize it. "As sensei?" One of the medics moved, and the Naruto clone saw the face of his master. Only a single eye was open, the other covered with burns and the like. Only a few tufts of Kuratori's white hair could be seen poking out from between the bandages, and even those looked sickly. Muramura stepped forward, beside the bed. You're gonna be okay, right?" Kuratori's single eye lowered, crushing the clone's hopes. "I'm sorry," the Chunin said. "I will not. This wasn't something I wanted to," teach you, but fate had other plans. A single tear made its way down Miramara's face. You should save your strength, sensei. Miramara-san, one of the medical ninja interjected, indicating his hands with a movement of his head. Keeping him alive is the only thing we can do, and even that is only temporary. I am sorry, but he will not make it to tomorrow. But, the clone replied. Kuratori said, and all eyes turned to him. I have outlasted everyone I was close to. Friends, comrades, teachers, family. I do not fear death. There is only one last thing I need, and I need it from you. Anything, Miramara replied, voice full of tears. I heard about you defending the Hokage with the sharp fist. Kuratori's lips twitched, and the hint of a smile appeared. I am glad that my choice was well made, and am proud of you, student. I just need to be sure the sharp fist will be in good hands. It is earlier than is usual, but this is my last request. I need you to make the oath, the Chunin intoned. Miramara gulped. He'd known about the oath, and even had made plans for it. He and Naruto had planned on clearing Kuratori on the prank before getting to that step, as all the clones agreed that such a pledge couldn't be made to someone who didn't know everything. But this was a scenario they'd never considered. Miramara had no real way of contacting Naruto, and no time to do so anyway. And he couldn't let his teacher's last request go unanswered. I swear. Miramara started, tears now flowing quickly. On family, fame, and the will of fire, that the sharp fist shall not die with me, and that it shall remain in the family for the generations that follow. Miramara was glad to note that, at least, his voice was clear. No clan shall claim it, and only the oath-bound shall practice it, that as long as I live. Kuratori did a small smile once more, then relaxed. Good, he said softly. I leave it in your hands. His breathing slowed, then stopped. A moment later, his heart followed suit. On October 22nd, 13 years and 12 days after the Kyuubi's attack, the last full-blooded member of the Hyojin family died of wounds received in battle after defending his village from invaders. He left behind only a single student. As soon the fighting tapered off, Ariko abandoned her spot on the apartment block's roof and ran straight for the shelters. She'd felt somewhat guilty for leaving them behind, so now that combat was done she was going back to them. The first two shelters were dead ends, one of them having even been evacuated due to explosives. The third, however, went differently. Ariko-chan! Mihoshi yelled as soon as she found her way inside, and the clone barely had time to use the chakra shield before being hugged to near bursting. We thought the worst. Are you alright? Where were you? What happened? I'm fine, Ariko replied, feeling guilty once more as the rest of the group joined in the hug. Asano even put an arm on Ariko's head to include a chibo into it. Everything's alright. Even with that, it was a good minute before the girls let her go. So, what happened? Fumichi, ever the leader, asked. I took a wrong turn, I think. That was the best explanation she'd found. I was watching the sky for enemies, and when I focused back on what was around me, all of you were gone. I tried checking around, but there were foreign ninja everywhere and I couldn't find you. What did you do? Hide? There was a note of doubt in Nishi's voice. The girls knew Ariko well, she wasn't the type to hide. The clone shook her head. No. I climbed the highest roof I could find and watched everything from there. I thought it best if I could see enemies coming before they got to me. Fumichi smirked. That's not all you did, was it? Well, I started, looking down somewhat. I kinda had a good view of the street outside the arena and a whole bunch of kunai, so I sniped whatever enemies I could see from there. That's more like you, Mihoshi said with a smile, and everyone nodded. Get anyone? A couple. More than a couple, actually. She couldn't be sure of the exact number, but she'd taken down at least 10 from her count. An A&B gave me enough explosive tags to do a fair amount of damage, actually. Ringo sighed while the rest had a little laugh. What is it with you and explosions? The planner of the group exclaimed. The class on explosive tags had been just a few days before the tournament, and the whole group were of the opinion that it was scary how casually she treated explosives. Ariko smiled as the moment passed. It seemed like they wouldn't hold what she'd done against her. So, what's happening outside? How's the battle going? Fumichi asked. A few other civilians and ninja around the group turned in our direction, clearly curious. Combat's nearly all done, the clone answered. Everyone's just sweeping for stragglers. She smiled and raised a fist in the air. It's a Leaf victory, all the way. Cheers erupted all around, and she was smothered in another hug. This time, however, Mihoshi didn't join. What about losses? Mihoshi asked, a sad frown forming on her face. Did you see what happened to Mom? Ariko hadn't. Even with the Chibo's help, she hadn't been able to pick out the woman from her position. It didn't mean anything. She might have simply missed her. Mitoto might have been fighting inside the corridors, or she might have been sent somewhere else. Still, Ariko reached out and hugged her fellow student. Don't worry. I'm sure she'll be fine. The rest of the group joined in. Mihoshi lowered her head. I just have nothing to fear, Mitoto's voice rang behind them. The group turned as one to see their comrade's mother standing in the door to the shelter. Miss me? She said with a smile. M.O.M. Mihoshi yelled, jumping into her mother's arms. Ariko gave a smile at the sight. She might not really know what family was about, but that didn't mean she couldn't be happy that others still had theirs. As Miramara left, Naruto also rose. There were probably still things to be done, and places he could help. The first thing he tried was going to the Hokage for orders, only to be stopped by the ANBU surrounding him. I am sorry, Uzumaki-san, the same female ANBU who'd intercepted him earlier spoke. But the Hokage is unavailable at this time. But he's right there? Naruto replied. See for yourself, the ANBU answered, moving slightly to the side. Naruto had barely made a single step forward when he noticed what she meant. Sarutobi was surrounded by people. Medics, couriers, guards, even someone he was pretty sure was Shikamaru's father. There were maps out and documents all over. I see, Naruto replied. It was clear Gigi had more important things to deal with right now. He was okay, that was what counted. He then turned toward the ANBU and bowed. Thank you for preventing me from making a mistake. Please inform him that I would like an audience with him once he has time free. Whoever she was, she'd been fair and polite, and deserved the same in return. I will be sure to pass the message, she replied with a small bow, then fell silent and stoic as the ANBU generally were. His second choice was going down to the Uruhara basement. He'd seen the clown-faced ANBU and had guessed at their origin, which meant that the clones below Konoha would have a good idea as to what was happening. His guess was confirmed in the tunnels, where many false ANBU were found. They were also all going in the same direction as him, which meant that they were clearly done above. Once in the basement proper, he quickly noted a group of clones standing separate from the rest, with maps and equipment at the ready. He went in that direction. So, what's the news? He asked as soon as he was close enough. Any place giving people trouble? The clone who looked like he was in charge approached. You're the original, right? Naruto nodded. With how many clones he'd made and spread, he couldn't blame them for losing track. Everything's pretty much done. Sand surrendered, what's left of Sound either escaped or is trying to, and the situation in the village is under control. A few fires here and there, along with enemy ninja in hiding, but nothing that requires our help. What are the losses? The real Naruto asked. Within the clones? Naruto nodded once more. We're actually down around 20% from yesterday, I think. Only that? Kyuha shook his head. I had everyone generate the maximum number of clones before they went to fight. If we count an average of 4 new clones for each bunch-in, that means we lost more than 2,000 clones today. And that's not counting those you made. Naruto grimaced. That was a lot more than he'd expected. Any important losses? The basement leader scowled. 3 council members. 2 of those in charge of the merchant network, and the one who found this place. Worse, the last doesn't even have a descendant still alive. The academy student nodded sadly. I'll have to find a worthy replacement for him. He then looked around and noted that most clones were abandoning their transformation. Anything else I need to care of? Yeah, Kyuha replied. There's this. He pointed toward the ceiling. Naruto followed the clone's finger to find a group of clones, still in their disguises, holding someone down while they were glued on the ceiling. It was Gaara. Eh? What? Naruto exclaimed. Why? He asked, his hand waving in Gaara's direction. You saw what he did in the tournament, right? Kyuha asked. Of course. Well, the first batch of clones we sent out as reinforcements were to either take down Gaara or keep him busy, the Bunshin explained. They managed the first by hosing him repeatedly with our Swait and Jutsu. We were planning to put him into a pool to keep him from getting his sand back, but it turns out that he can still control wet sand, even while unconscious. He pointed back up. That up there is the best solution we came up with. Gaara's conscious but blinded, and we're making sure his sand can't protect him by blowing it back with water regularly. And he knows he'd be dropping dozens of meters straight down into a pool if he does anything to the clones there. Okay. That was a novel method to keep someone prisoner, but he couldn't argue about the effectiveness. What should I do about this? I don't know. Kyuha shrugged. By the time the dispatched clones got Gaara out of his sand, he was basically choking on the ground. They didn't feel like finishing him on the spot. We still aren't sure if he did whatever happened on purpose. His sand reacts automatically, so he might simply have lost control. He was silent for a moment. You're the boss, so it's your decision, in the end. Naruto didn't like the idea of killing him. His clones had killed enough defenseless people during Gato's assassination, and he didn't like it one bit. He could live with killing in battle, but not a prisoner under control like that. And there had been more than enough blood spilled today. I'll have to talk to him first, Naruto finally decided. See what kind of person he is. I'm not gonna decide someone's fate without that. Kyuha nodded in agreement. Go right up, he replied, pointing at the wall. That's what Naruto did. He walked straight up, and was surprised to see a good bunch of other Bunshin following himself, either as bodyguards or out of curiosity. With how big the room was, it took a good 5 minutes of fighting gravity before he reached the Sand Genin. As soon as he was within meters of Gaara, the Genin's head turned in Naruto's direction. I can feel you, he choked out. You are more powerful than anyone else around here. You are here to kill me, aren't you? His voice was full of conviction. Not if I can help it. That clearly wasn't the answer Gaara expected. Why? He yelled. Why would you not kill me? Your existence, why would you not prove it? Prove my existence? That made no sense to Naruto. How would killing prove my existence? Isn't that how the strong prove their strength? Their right to live? Gaara asked. By taking another's existence as your own? Naruto grimaced. That makes even less sense. You would kill and kill just to prove that you are alive? He was starting to think he might have to kill Gaara. He wouldn't like it, but he wasn't going to leave a killer on the loose. Yes, Gaara answered instantly. Isn't that how the ninja world works? A detail came to Naruto's mind. What happens when you've killed everyone? He asked. Gaara opened his mouth to reply, then closed it. If you kill everybody who ever knew you, nobody will remember you, Naruto continued. It will be as if you had never existed as a person. A plague or a natural disaster could do the same thing. You would no longer be human, just a thing. There was a minute of silence as Gaara clearly digested those words. Why? He finally asked, voice low. Why does everyone try to kill me then? Naruto didn't like the sound of that. It made him think a little too much about his situation, especially before the academy. Who tried to kill you? My father, Gaara replied, sounding somewhat broken. My uncle, Shikamaru, Furiko, Tokaz, Kotaro. He started, and didn't stop. Name after name came from his lips, and for a good 3 minutes he enumerated everyone who'd tried assassinating him. Lee was the last, and while Naruto disagreed with Gaara on that, he couldn't deny that the taijutsu specialist had gone at full power against the Sand Genin. Still, it hurt to think about that many assassination attempts. Part of it, though, might be because he was standing upside down on the ceiling. You're not gonna try killing me again? Naruto asked. It is useless, he answered, voice low. You would defeat me once more. Naruto smiled slightly. Let's get you down, then. It'll be more comfortable to talk. Once down, Naruto got the whole story. How Gaara had been host to a demon before he was even born, how he'd been seen as a failure at controlling the Ichibi, and how that had led to the numerous murder attempts. His sand protected him from each one, killing his foes in gruesome ways. But still they came, until his father the Kazekage decided to use his violent tendencies instead. It disgusted Naruto. At first he'd been tense, ready to switch with the clone at a moment's notice, but as the story continued his disgust overwhelmed his readiness. especially since he could imagine it so easily. He'd known of a few attempts on his own life, and with how much the ANBU were watching him, that was probably only a drop in the bucket. If Iruka and Gigi had been like Gaara's family, he probably would have turned out the same way, and that is assuming he'd have even survived. Naruto rose from his seating position and put his hand on Gaara's shoulder. The genin's sand armor had regenerated, but he still made the gesture. I'll remember you, Gaara. As long as I live, I'll never let people forget you. Nobody will deny your existence while I'm around. I'll remember who you were and what you did, your trials and your battles. I promise. Gaara looked at Naruto like he was a square peg in a round hole. Why? He finally asked. Naruto looked at his fellow container in the eye. Because, at the worst moment of my life, I was only 2 people away from being like you. If Iruka and Gigi hadn't been there, I might have gone down the same path as you. And now, I have more people behind me, with even more to come. One day, I'll be the Hokage, and I'll protect everyone. And no one will be able to pretend I don't exist. You could have gone the same way as me? Gaara asked. It looked like he couldn't make sense of that. As an answer, Naruto raised the hem of his shirt, channeling chakra to make the seal there visible. Kyubi, he replied simply. Normally, he wouldn't have told anyone, but if there was one person who could understand this burden, it was Gaara. The sand genin crumbled on himself. I never had any chance, didn't I? Not for the reason you're thinking of, Naruto replied seriously. I had others I was protecting behind me. You would have had to grind me to dust before I gave way, and even then I'd have found some way to stop you for their sake. Gaara lowered his head. I don't have anybody like that. The Konoha student shook his head. You will. Give it time. As long as you don't kill everyone you come across, you'll eventually find people to stand by you. Believe it. It took a moment, but Gaara finally smiled a little. It was a sad, anemic thing, but better than nothing. And Naruto wasn't going to let the silence grow. He sat back down. So, tell me about Suna. How's it like? How are the ninja trained there? And what food? I bet you have different kinds of ramen there. There was a moment of silence. What's ramen? Gaara asked, completely serious. Naruto's face fell, and he wasn't the only one. Most of the clones within hearing range had the same reaction, the few who didn't dashed out directly toward Ichiraku ramen. Clearly, there were issues that needed to be solved. Muramaru walked aimlessly around the hospital. He'd cried all the tears he'd had in him, and still he felt wrong, like he was in a nightmare or something similar. That was why he hadn't updated everyone yet. Something like this would hit them like a physical blow, and he didn't want everyone to get it right out of the blue. He just ambled here and there, trying to make sense of everything. Hello, Muramaru-san, came a voice from behind him. Glad to see you up and healthy. The clone turned around to see Iruka a few meters back. He had a bandage over his head and his right ear was covered in gauze, but he seemed okay nonetheless. The Chunin teacher didn't miss Muramaru's face, though. What's happening? He asked, unsure. The Bunshin lowered his head. He thought he'd cried all he could, but there was a sudden stinging in his eyes. Iruka-sensei, he mumbled. Kuritori-sensei, he's dead. Iruka's face fell. I'm sorry for your loss, he replied gravely. He knew the taijutsu specialist had become quite close to Naruto in his various forms, and that the boy had much respect for his newest teacher. You want to talk about it? Muramaru's only answer was a small nod. Iruka took his student by the shoulder and guided him outside, then back to his own place. He lived close enough that this wasn't a long walk, and preferred talking in private in case the prank was still going. He might be overthinking things, but the prank was still an S-rank secret, and treason wasn't on his mind. He sat Muramaru down in his living room, then made tea for the both of them. With how rough their day had been, they both needed it. So, Iruka said once seated opposite his student, who'd let go of his transformation. Tell me how it happened. The Bunshin took a sip out of his cup. We had seats on the east side of the arena. I got caught by surprise by the genjutsu, but he woke me up near instantly. I wanted to help him, but he kicked me away, sending me near one of the exits. That's the last I saw of him. He drank some more, then took a deep breath. Based on what? The ANBU who brought him to the hospital told me he eliminated a few enemies in his region of the stands without getting hurt too badly, then continued forward to other places where there were still enemies. One of the sound ninja he encountered was a ninjutsu specialist, who controlled clouds of acid mist. Iruka scowled. That was the worst type of opponent for a close-range specialist. They fought for a while at a stalemate, but the mist kept spreading, and it started getting close to people that were still unconscious in the stands. So, Kiritori, the Naruto clone gulped. He ran straight in. At melee range, Kiritori took the sound ninja down in a minute, but by then it was done. He protected his eyes, but there was acid in his nose and lungs, and he could barely breathe. He still crawled forward, trying to help, and that's when the ANBU found him. His face lowered. I should have said no. That shook Iruka out of his thoughts. What? He asked me if I was interested in seeing the finals, and he knew that, as an orphan, nobody could have brought me there. He sniffed. Maybe if I'd said no, he wouldn't have been in the arena and he'd still be alive right now. No, Iruka replied sternly. You can't think like that, Naruto. He might have gone anyway, alone. And even if he hadn't, he would have fought, like everyone else. One of those giant snakes might have squished him, or someone might have detonated his house, or a dozen other scenarios. We can never know what might have happened, only live with what did. It should have been me, Naruto scowled. I'm a clone, that would have been better. The Chunin shook his head sadly. Kiritori might have thought the same thing, you know. What? He was old, Naruto. Close to his 60s. He was older than the Sannin, Iruka explained. I can understand that you, as a clone, think he was more important, but in his mind, I'm pretty sure you were the first priority. He had 10, 20 years maximum in front of him, and probably even less, while you have nearly your whole life to go through. The old sacrificing for the young is the normal order of things. And I knew he'd outlived nearly everyone he'd known. He probably didn't want to see more die while he still survived. But, the clone said, I went through the same thing when I was around your age, the Chunin teacher said, smiling slightly in remembrance. My first Jonin sensei, Hikaku, didn't like me much. I was a horrible prankster at that time, and he thought I wasn't taking things seriously enough. He rode me all the time, made me train until I thought I would die. There was always something else to learn, a next exercise to do, a new book to memorize. I didn't like him much at the time. What happened to him? My team got a C-rank mission in northern Yonokuni, and it turned out there was a Kumo team in the same area. That was before the peace treaty between Konoha and Kumo, and as such my team was ambushed right after our mission. Hikaku stayed behind, buying us time. Iruka smiled a little. That was the last we ever saw of him. There was a moment of silence as Naruto digested that. My team got back to Konoha without any other issue, only to find ourselves not knowing what to do. We were stuck in the village until an investigation was completed, and I found out I had no clue what to do. My former teacher had kept me busy for so long that, now that he was gone, I didn't know what to do. Pranking seemed juvenile after what had happened, and I'd always relied on him for training. How did things end up? Naruto asked, curious. Our team's leadership got taken over by a compatriot of my former sensei. He was only a special jonin, but he did a good job continuing Hikaku's work. On one of the first days, he took us aside and gave us just about the same speech I gave you. He shook his head sadly. Turns out we were Hikaku's second team, his first having died during the Third Great Shinobi War. And he'd never gotten over that loss. My team had survived, so Hiko had said, and that was the most important thing to Hikaku. The rest was just details. Naruto reached out for another sip, only to realize his cup was empty. Iruka smiled and poured him another. The clone had to admit it helped. The thought of Kiritori dying still hurt, but the idea that he'd succeeded in the end made it less painful. And having someone to talk to was a good distraction. Tell me about them, he asked. He wasn't ready for this conversation to end. Iruka smiled. Well, you might not have known, but I graduated last in my class. Like it is now, I ended up with Prank Day 111. You may come in, Hinata-sama. Your father is waiting for you, the Hyuga branch member said, bowing in the early dawn's light. Hinata bowed in return. Thank you, Hohito-san, she replied, rising. She then stepped inside and bowed once more before her father. Ota-sama, Hanabi-chan. Thank you for coming, daughter, Hayashi intoned. The clan has questions regarding your fight in the arena. That didn't surprise Hinata. She'd expected so, and had even prepared for this possibility. She'd thought about it until sleep finally claimed her late last night. Was my performance not to your liking? No. Hayashi quickly answered. It was satisfactory. He was silent for a moment. Please perform the Kage Bunshin right this moment, he then continued. Hinata's hands flashed into the necessary cross seal near instantly, before she actually thought about the request. She did, however, stop before completing the technique. May I ask why, father? She finally said, lowering her face a little. You may, the Hyuga leader replied. There are those who believe you must have had outside help during the battle, especially with this technique. The Hyuga genin nodded. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. She invoked, and an exact copy of herself appeared right beside her. Does this satisfy you, father? She asked. Hayashi's eyes flashed Byakugan white for an instant before returning to normal. It does, regarding those accusations, he finally responded. There are other details, however, that require explanations. Hinata said nothing, waiting for her father to continue. Who taught you these techniques? He asked. I've already inquired with your Jonin sensei, and she has no idea where you might have acquired this level of skill. Who was your teacher, daughter? She had been expecting this question. I cannot tell you, Oto-sama. I have taken oath not to reveal my teacher's name. That wasn't literally what she'd sworn, but the result was the same. She had promised not to reveal that Naruto knew the Kage Bunshin, but since that jutsu was part of what she had been taught, simply revealing Naruto as her teacher implied that he knew said technique. Daughter, the techniques you have learned are dangerous, Hayashi replied, voice rising. They have side effects. I have been informed, Oto-sama, Hinata interrupted. My teacher made sure I had knowledge of them before even starting. Hinata had expected her father to argue longer, but he stopped for a moment. I suppose that explains you using that technique on your cousin only at the end of the match. She nodded. Indeed. And the medics have assured me that Neji will make a complete recovery. He will, however, have to be blinded until his recovery is complete. Hayashi nodded. That is good news. What was that jutsu, anyway? Hanabi added, joining the conversation. I've never seen Neji taken down so quickly. Hayashi turned to his youngest daughter. While the Byakugan grants us numerous advantages, it is not without weaknesses, he explained. Our sight is more detailed than that of any ordinary ninja, and it is through this sensibility that this technique harms us. He turned back to his eldest. Hinata, demonstrate for us. Are you certain, Oto-sama? Hinata asked, unsure. I would not want to hurt any of you. He nodded. Use the bare minimum of power. This is only a demonstration. His head turned to the side. Hanabi, you are not to use your Byakugan until I say so. Pay close attention, as this may save your life one day. Hi, Oto-sama, Hanabi replied, inching forward to see better. Hinata turned to the side and made the hand seals as slowly as she could, then pushed the least amount of chakra forward. Right-un, Mabushii Kagayaki. She invoked, and light flashed through the room. HRM, Hanabi grunted, shielding her eyes with her arm. Hinata instantly dashed at her sister's side to check up on her. Hayashi shook his head. Leave it. You performed the technique correctly, and whatever blindness it caused is temporary. Hanabi sat back straight. I am fine, sister, he confirmed, then continued. Can we see the other techniques you used in the arena? Hinata smiled. I will have to go get my equipment, and we will need to move to a stronger dojo, Hinata explained. The Wano Matsuri was not designed with rice paper walls in mind. She did have a few chakrams on her, but not enough to properly show the technique. The weapons she carried were reminders of her training, her successes, and Naruto's belief in her. Their simple presence was comforting. Let us do so, the Hyuga leader said, rising. Gather your tools and join us in the East Dojo. Come, Hanabi, he said, and she followed her father outside. Now alone in the room, Hinata couldn't help but smile. The only thing he'd said about her battle was that it was satisfactory. Coming from someone as strict as him, it was a straight-up compliment. She had fought more for herself and for Naruto, but her father's approval was still something she cherished. Hinata then rushed out. Making her father wait was always a bad idea, and she'd always liked spending time with her sister. And it seemed like it was time to dance for her sake. Naruto was waiting in front of the academy's doors. He wasn't alone there. Both his clones were present, along with the entire fashion squad and a number of other students. There were quite a few of his fellows missing, however. Some had probably skipped school after the events of yesterday, but it made Naruto feel guilty. And not only about Kuratori. Muramura had informed the rest of the council late last night, and had updated the rest of the clones afterward. Losing Kuratori hurt, especially since he'd finally started accepting the real Naruto. Now, he would never know about the prank. Muramura had also told him about the oath, and Naruto had agreed with the clone's actions. Saying no wasn't a choice, not at that time. What Naruto felt guilty about was the invasion itself. His clones were supposed to be an information network, and something big like an invasion had gone through without notice. Worse was, now that the fighting was done, there were dozens of details coming from the bunshins between Konoha and Suna that should have raised flags. Big orders of meat, medicine shortages, rumors of people in the forests. Hindsight was 20/20, but with the cost the invasion had. Iruka finally opened the doors, interrupting Naruto's thoughts, and the boy went right to his desk. The empty spots in the classroom seemed ominous, as did the people missing on the roll call. Then the door opened just as Iruka was about to start his class. "Sorry to interrupt, Iruka-san," the Chunin exclaimed as he came in. "What can I do for you, Chunin-san?" the teacher asked. The ninja withdrew a scroll. "The Hokage would like to see Joden Ariko, Uzumaki Naruto and Muramura along with you, Iruka-san." The teacher rose. "May I ask why?" The messenger shook his head. "I could not tell you, Iruka-san. I have not been informed. I will, however, be replacing you until you return." "Very well," he turned to the class. "Please be kind to my replacement while I am gone. Joden-san, Uzumaki-san, Muramura-san, with me." All three rose and went forward. As Naruto was the one furthest back, he caught the wordless message both the clones sent. "We're fucked." Naruto could only agree with them. The whole way passed with Naruto trying to figure out how he'd been caught. He didn't fear the Hokage knowing, but didn't want others to figure it out. Did he do something during the invasion that broke the prank? Whose actions did it? Reporting as ordered, Hokage-sama, Iruka called out clearly. Naruto realized he was now standing right before the Hokage's desk, and hadn't even noticed getting there. Indeed. Joden Ariko, the Hokage intoned seriously, taking a puff out of his pipe. "Yes." The clone squeaked. "Uzumaki Naruto." "Hi," he said, forcing his voice not to squeak as that of his clone. "Muramura." "Present." The male clone managed to keep his voice cool. "Based on your actions yesterday, I am promoting the three of you to genin, effective immediately. You will form Team 1 under." "What?" The three Narutos yelled in eerie synchronicity. Sarutobi inclined his head to the side. "Is there a problem?" Iruka was visibly holding back his reaction. "No, Hokage-sama, there isn't." He bent in half, putting one arm around his stomach. "I can't," he said, then lost the battle for seriousness. "Bwahahaha!" he exclaimed as he fell to the floor. "Yumano-san?" "Ah, come on, sensei!" the three Narutos said again in chorus. Iruka simply kept laughing on the floor. The Hokage turned to the three newly promoted genins. "Can you explain this to me?" The three looked at each other, all unsure how to explain. "This guy is off." Iruka wheezed between bout of hilarity. The three pouted, but did as ordered. 3 copies of Naruto now stood in the office, and Ichigo jumped from his current perch to the one standing in the center. The Hokage scowled. "This kind of prank isn't funny, Naruto," he intoned clearly. Iruka visibly disagreed with that opinion. "Now, where are the real Ariko and Muramura?" Those words released a new wave of laughter from the Chunin on the floor. "Scroll," he managed to say. "Give him the scroll." Naruto withdrew the scroll Iruka had handed him weeks ago, and gave it to the village's leader. He recognized it instantly. "But what?" he started, then the pieces came together instantly in his mind. Naruto's transformation technique. The Kagebunshin. Naruto's prank, which involved returning in class. The required means, in this case money. The reason 2 academy students from outside the village had done better than most genin during an invasion. The Hokage nearly dropped his pipe, before putting it aside. He looked down at the papers before him. the reviews, recommendations, and comments that he'd gone through in preparation for this promotion. And he hadn't caught on a bit. He couldn't help but smile. He had all the pieces, and he missed it completely. Well, you caught me, he finally admitted with a laugh. You really got me. Chapter 20, Team 1, Prank Day 111. Everyone waited patiently for Iruka to catch his breath. The Hokage snickered a few times, while the three Narutos stood uncomfortably, unsure of where this meeting would lead. It took a good minute before the Chunin managed to rise back from the floor. Apologies, Hokage-sama, he said, his breath still catching. Konoha's leader waved him off with a smile. No worries, Yumino-san. It's not every day that the Hokage is tricked by an academy student. He thought for a moment. Especially not for the second time. Second time? The Naruto crowned with a bunny said. Oh yeah? The scroll. Sarutobi nodded. Indeed, the scroll. Now, regarding your promotion. Naruto shrank upon himself. It's not cancelled, is it? The Hokage shook his head. No. You've clearly proven you have the skill necessary for the rank. I might make changes to your team, but your new rank is final. He reached inside one of his drawers and withdrew 3 Hittite. Would you like to do the honors? Sarutobi asked as he held them out to the Chunin teacher. I would be honored, Iruka replied with a bow. The Chunin rose and formally affixed the headbands on the temples of the 3 new genin, saving the true Naruto for last. I never doubted that you would succeed, Naruto. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He'd have ruffled his hair, but Ichigo was right there. He then looked at the other 2. Do me proud, students. Hi. They all answered. Welcome to the Ninja Corps, genin, Sarutobi continued, sounding like a proud grandfather. With the things you have already accomplished, I expect great things from you all. Yes, Hokage-sama. They replied cheerfully. Now, if you don't mind, return to your disguises while I discuss the situation with your teacher, Hiruzen continued. I'll make sure you are informed about what we decide. Do we need to go back to school? The real Naruto asked his teacher, clearly hoping it wasn't the case. Iruka shook his head with a smile. No, you don't. You're genin now. Anyway, I'm pretty sure you have training to do. Sure, sensei. Naruto continued with a smile, while the other 2 turned back into their previous forms. The 3 started walking out, only to stop as Naruto turned. Oh yeah? I was forgetting something. He faced his teacher. There's a council meeting tonight, and you're invited. We'll be going over the invasion, and there's a lot to discuss. Council meeting? The Hokage asked. You're invited too, Gigi. Tonight at 7. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I can't change my schedule that easily, Hiruzen sighed. I'm meeting with our sealing experts regarding repairs to our village's outer wall at that time. Send a shadow clone, then. I know very well you can use them. Naruto remembered him using a number some of the times he met his unofficial grandfather while younger. He hadn't known what they were at the time. Anyway, Iruka can give you the details, he smiled. I'll leave you 2 to your discussion. See you later. He then walked out along with his copies. Council meeting? The Hokage asked once more as he turned toward the academy teacher. Said teacher shook his head. You will have to see it to believe it. I didn't until it was right in my face. He straightened. Now, what did you want to discuss with me, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi took a deep breath. I will trust in your assessment of Naruto's skill, Chunin. What would you recommend be done with him in terms of a team? The teacher thought for a good minute. I'd recommend staying with the course you were already pursuing, Hokage-sama. Explain your reasoning, please, Hiruzen replied, indicating for Iruka to sit down. The Chunin did so. You are still seeking to create balanced teams, correct? Hiruzen nodded. Adding Naruto to any other team would unbalance it. He's now powerful beyond any normal genin, and even most Chunin. He gazed absently towards the ceiling as he considered his words. If he fought me with everything he has, I wouldn't stand a chance. He took Mizuki out easily, and that was before he began his current training regimen. I'm pretty sure he could give even special jonin a run for their money. You're not the only one who believes so, Sarutobi pointed out. I received a number of recommendations from current ANBU members that he'd be promoted straight to Chunin and placed in the ANBU Corps. I refused those, of course. We have no need for another Itachi. He shook his head. And I couldn't refuse him a Jonin sensei to help him grow. He looked straight at the teacher. Or do you disagree? I do not, Hokage-sama, Iruka answered. That is exactly why I'd recommend his clones as his teammates. With that scenario, even if Naruto is ignored in favor of the rest of his team, he will still attain the necessary knowledge. Something came to his mind right there. What were you planning in regards to his clones? Nothing. I am not seeing the utility of keeping them. Iruka shook his head. I would recommend doing so. His 2 clones have links with other people his age, and they're helping him socialize and grow. Removing them would draw attention without much gain. Having different team members would do the same, the Hokage pointed out. The teacher shook his head once more. Between the power disparity and the way Naruto is generally treated, I wouldn't go with that option. Even children his own age? Hiruzen asked, scowling. Iruka nodded sadly. He was about to add to this, but the Hokage's intercom chose that moment to come to life. Hokage-sama, the secretary interrupted. You have 5 minutes before your next appointment. We will have to resume this discussion later then, Sarutobi said with a sigh. Iruka nodded. If you could send a clone to the academy around 6, and we can continue then, he said, then added, and come disguised, or you might draw too much attention. You'll have no problem dealing with a clone as a real person? Hiruzen inquired. Some people would be offended by something like that. Iruka simply smiled. It won't be a problem, Hokage-sama. You'll understand better once we meet with Naruto tonight. He then bowed. By your leave. Go, Chunin. We'll continue later. The village leader then cleaned his desk and prepared himself for meeting the representatives of the Merchants Association. He did make sure to finish his pipe, though. He had a feeling he would need it. While Naruto was going over the problem of missing memories during the invasion and Muramura had launched himself straight into training, Ariko had another priority. She waited until the lunch bell sounded at the academy, then returned to meet the rest of the Konoha fashion group in its usual eating spot. Ichigo accompanied her, silent in his usual place in her hair. Finally, Asano called out as Ariko approached. We were starting to think something had happened. She gestured beside her, indicating where a spot had been left open. Sit down and tell us what went on. You didn't, Nishi said, eyes wide, as the clone came closer. Ariko nodded slightly, at which moment she jumped straight up and hugged the Kage Bunshin. Congratulations. The rest of the group also rose, though it was clear from their faces that they didn't understand. Ariko, Nishi, explain please, Fumichi finally asked. Nishi released the Naruto clone and stood to the side. You didn't notice? She said with a smile. Look at what's hanging from her neck. That was where Ariko had decided to wear her own headband. More eyes went wide. A Konoha Hittite? Asano exclaimed. You got promoted? Ariko nodded shyly. What followed was a girlish scream, along with a number of hugs and words of encouragement. It took a good few minutes before everyone managed to sit down. So, tell us everything. Nahoshi demanded once everyone was seated. How did it happen? What did the Hokage tell you? Were Muramura and Uzumaki also promoted? Are you 3 gonna be a team? Whoa girl. Fumichi interrupted. Give her time to explain. Ariko did so. She launched herself into an edited version of what had happened in the Hokage's office, keeping the discussion of the prank outside the story. Nishi raised her hand as soon as the clone was done. You still haven't told us who'll be on your team, she pointed out. I don't know, Ariko answered. The Hokage made it known that the team composition wasn't final yet. Fumichi nodded. They're probably waiting until they know for sure who will need to be replaced. At least one person will be promoted after the fights we saw, and that's not talking about genin losses, she said with a scowl, then turned toward Ringo. Why are you pouting? I had this all planned, she finally replied. We 6 were all gonna pass together, that way some of us might be on the same team. There might have even been a full fashion squad team. Her pout got worse. Now it's all ruined. Ariko had to agree it was possible. Compared to last year, there were quite a few more girls in the class. A little more than half, actually. Sorry, the Kage Bunshin replied. Don't be, Fumichi said, her voice carrying the authority of the group's leader. You worked hard, and were rewarded for it. Don't let anyone take that from you. She then turned toward Ringo. You should be happy for your classmate. I am, Ringo exclaimed. It's just. Anyway. Nahoshi interjected. There was probably gonna be one of us alone on a team, at least. They might make a few teams this year with 2 girls and a boy, but never 3 girls, not unless they couldn't help it. The rest of the group nodded sagely. So, Fumichi continued after a pause. 3 cheers for the first Konoha fashion ninja to make it to Genin. Hurrah! She exclaimed, throwing her fist in the air. Hurrah! 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 The rest of the girls imitated, their own arms rising in turn. They were unknowingly accompanied by a rabbit who clapped both his back paws and her hair along with them. Ariko smiled slightly, face somewhat down in embarrassment. She had to say it felt good to have her group support her like that. She'd been afraid they would take it badly, and having these doubts evaporate at their words was a great relief. She'd have to make sure to return the favor once they passed. Iruka was surprised when, 5 minutes before 6, a dark-haired boy around Naruto's age entered his office. It wasn't anybody he recognized, not one of his current students at least, and probably not even a former one. "Can I help you?" he finally asked. "Is the room secure?" the boy replied, clear authority in his voice. Iruka realized instantly who it was. He focused a few instants, trying to sense if there was any chakra out of place, then nodded. "It is, Hokage-sama." The bunshin of the village leader pulled a chair up beside Iruka's desk and sat, his form changing back to that of the elderly Sandaime. "It's been a while since I went out like that." "Years even," he said with a smile on his face. "Well, you fooled me for a moment, at least. Excellent disguise." As a teacher, Iruka couldn't help but evaluate what was put before him. It had none of the usual tells associated with transformation techniques. "Well, I did use this form for many years, even if it was decades ago," the clone explained. "Anyway, you asked that we should meet, Chunin." The mood instantly went serious. "Correct, Hokage-sama," he replied with a nod. "Since the beginning of this academy term, I've been evaluating my fellow teachers and their actions towards Naruto." He went to his desk and withdrew a heavy folder from within another. "Here are the results of what I've found," he said as he handed the Hokage the dossier. This is quite a number of reports," the Hokage's clone said simply by the weight of paper present. Iruka nodded sadly. "Indeed, Hokage-sama. And those are only the events for which I have tangible proof." The clone started reading and quickly advanced in the dossier. He stopped when he reached a large number of sheets clipped together. "What are those?" "Naruto's exams," the Chunin explained. "From every year. The red corrections are the original ones, while my own are in green." The Hokage's copy rapidly went over the first, second and third. The pattern quickly became visible. "Are they all like this?" he nearly growled. "Yes, Hokage-sama," Iruka replied with his face down. "From Naruto's first exam to his latest." "This is more serious and premeditated than I thought," the Kage Bunshin said, dropping the folder on Iruka's desk in disgust. "It is worse than you think, Hokage-sama." Adding the revised grades together, Naruto would have gained 5 points to his final score, enough to give him the lowest passing grade the first time he tested for promotion. The clone rose to his feet instantly, and killing intent flooded the room. "You mean to tell me," the Bunshin's voice rang across the room, echoing with restrained power, "that the bias Naruto faced in the academy forced him to repeat his classes, and that twice?" "More than twice, Hokage-sama." The Chunin lowered his head in shame. "This year was his 4th. It is quite possible that, if it hadn't been for the battlefield promotion you gave him, this year's result would have been the same." "How about other students?" the clone continued, clearly trying to keep his anger reined in. "I cannot say. I lack the time to review every other student's exams. I would not be surprised in the least, though. Not after Mizuki." Iruka scowled at the reminder. Going over his former friend's documents had been illuminating. There were hints to his treachery well into the past. The clone took a deep breath to calm himself, then turned to the head teacher. "Keep order here for the next few days. As soon as the Konoha analysts are finished with the consequences of the invasion, I am sending a dozen of them here to go over everything. The last 10 years, if need be." He stared down at Iruka, who nodded. "Naruto may have passed, but I will make sure that no child wanting to be a ninja is ever refused due to the bias of a teacher." Iruka smiled and nodded. "You have my support, Hokage-sama." There was a moment of silence as the Kage Bunshin thought, before he fell back in his chair. "Hopefully, this disaster is the worst news of the day." "It should be," Iruka replied. Council meetings tend to be fast and informal, and bad news tend to call for such an event instantly, not delayed as this one was. You still will not give me any clue as to what I'll find? The clone asked. He clearly wasn't used to information being kept from him. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, Iruka responded. And anyway, it's time to leave. You'll see soon enough. The clone forced himself not to pout. It wouldn't help, and this situation clearly wasn't in any way dangerous. If it was, he could have ordered Iruka to speak. He let it be. He'd see soon enough, anyway. The tunnel was the first thing that surprised the Hokage clone. The hidden entry he used was perfectly placed, accessible, inconspicuous, and desolate. The path was small enough at first that one didn't think it would be used for travel, but still large enough to allow so. And it widened. And widened. By the time the two ninja were 100 meters in, the path was high enough for a normal man to stand tall. By 200, seal lights started appearing, though many showed signs of disuse. And, after 400 meters, he finally came to a large room, bigger than anything he'd expected. High ceiling, flat and long. He saw here and there hints of the strengthening seals that were necessary for a place that size. But that was nothing compared to what was inside said room. Before him were lines and lines of people, standing at attention. Most of them were Narutos wearing different uniforms, but there were here and there different faces. He recognized Ariko and Miromaru, along with a civilian he remembered passing a few days before the invasion, whose name was unknown to him. Looking to the sides, the Bunshin realized that the lines did not limit themselves to the ground. On the walls next to him, scores of what he supposed must be clones stood rigid. Some were even on the ceiling itself. The Naruto closest to him stepped forward. The Hokage is in residence, it yelled. Like a wave, all the clones bowed. Welcome, Sandaime-sama. The many voices rang in chorus. May the will of fire burn forever. Luckily, the Hokage had been in situations like this one many times in his life. At ease, he ordered, looking around as the many Narutos straightened. He noticed Iruka smiling behind him. I'll not stop you long. He looked around once more. Could the real Naruto come up? One copy did so. The only difference between this one and the many others was the rabbit standing on its head. Ariko's, if he remembered correctly. There was a story there, he was sure. Welcome to the Uruhara basement, GG. At those words, Hiruzen was now certain this was the real thing. Ready for the meeting? He said with a smile. I can clearly see I'll have quite a few surprises there, the Sandaime clone answered. Still, no time like the present. Naruto nodded with a grin. Council members, step up, he called, his voice filling the room. Miromaru and Ariko advanced a step, along with a number of other clones. The Hokage was surprised to see Gaara also present. The Hokage moved forward, then was surprised to see the former Kazekage's son bow. Good day, Sandaime Hokage. Good day, Sabaku no Gaara, the clone replied. I didn't expect to see you here. I was captured by Naruto's forces during the invasion, and have been staying in this basement since then, the Sand Genin explained. You do know that the Sand forces have surrendered to the Leaf? Gaara nodded. I do. I have personally surrendered to Naruto here. He smiled slightly at said boy to show that he didn't hold it against him. The Sandaime nodded. Your sister did not participate in the invasion, as she was taken down beforehand, he informed the foreign Genin. And your brother was captured trying to reach her. Both have already been cleared for freedom under surveillance, and have been asking about you. As far as I know, no answer has yet been given to them. The Hokage's clone smiled. You may want to come out of this basement sometime to meet them. Gaara thought for a second, then bowed. I will ponder this and give you an answer later. Let's go, Naruto said, waving forward. Time's wastin'. The village leader's Bunshin let himself be directed higher to a room where a long table was waiting. He took a seat at the place indicated, the very end of the table, and looked at the other participants as they took their own seats. There were clear differences between most of them, and one, to his surprise, was wearing a clown mask similar to those seen on the unknown ANBU that had saved the day. He nearly stopped to interrogate him, but then decided to wait. He'd grill Naruto about everything once this was done. When all were seated, there were still 2 places empty, and Naruto was still standing beside what was clearly his chair. Gaara had taken a seat in a corner of the room and not at the table. Wait a second while I call our last member, he said, and everyone nodded. His hands then flashed through hand seals, fast enough that it was clear this was a well-practiced technique. Sarutobi recognized it instantly. Summoning technique, Naruto yelled, slamming both his palms on the floor. An instant later, 2 rabbits appeared. The smallest, who was around Naruto's height, wore a blue hakama and bowed politely to Naruto. The second, who was as tall as a normal adult, inclined his head with a smile and took one of the empty seats. The remaining rabbit did not take the other, standing attentively behind his taller brethren. Only then did Naruto sit down. Welcome, all, to the latest meeting of those in the know. As you can see, we have a new member here. He smiled at the Sandaime. First, however, a moment of silence to those lost. He indicated the empty seat, then bowed his head. All the participants, be them clones or not, did the same. The Hokage was no different. He'd gone over the preliminary losses, and dozens he'd known had perished. Konoha had survived, but the price had been heavy. Head after head rose once more, and Naruto waited until all were done. Miramara's was the last, and no one seemed surprised. First, status report. He turned to the seated rabbit beside him. Nanabo, how's Monty? Mad but fine, the summon replied. Whatever wounds he had were superficial. Mad? Another Naruto clone asked. Nanabo nodded. Mad Monty hates people who use explosions or explosives. He smiled. He has been very clear that, if you ever find yourself facing this snakeman again, you are to call upon him. I'll make sure to do so, Naruto said. He did a good job this time, so no reason not to call on him. Perfect, the rabbit replied. The Naruto with the clown mask rose next. As for clones, we've built our numbers back up. Only vacancy we have is the one right here. He pointed to the empty chair beside him. Right, Naruto said. Any suggestions? I propose Nico, Ariko said. There was a chorus of nods. The real Uzumaki looked around. Any opposition? Nothing except shaken heads. Approved then. Nico's the latest council member, he confirmed. Merchant Network, make sure he's informed about it. 3 clones holding large books nodded. Okay then. Second point, the invasion, Naruto said, and you could hear the seriousness in his voice. We did pretty good for people unprepared, but we could have done a lot better. So, ideas for improvements everyone. Hiruzen's clone was surprised by how well the meeting was going as the clones brought forth idea after idea. Accomplishing a third of what was being done here would take at least thrice as long in his regular meetings, if not more. Here, suggestions were brought up, voted on and dispatched in minutes if not seconds. There were no arguments over who should do what, those tasks simply nodded in confirmation. He wished things could be that easily in his own councils. Anything not covered? Naruto asked, and received no reply. Done. Third, merchants. Anything that needs to be brought up? Nothing much yet, the center member of the bookkeeping trio answered. Civilian losses aren't completely known yet, so there hasn't been much on this side. Ichiraka came through without a scratch, but Shushuya's been badly hit, and the Konoha Zazenkyo was totaled by those rampaging snakes. Everyone in the buildings managed to reach a shelter without issue, but who knows how long before they reopen. Anything we can do to help? Miramara asked. Not yet, the merchant replied. We're planning on giving them their next delivery at cost, but nothing yet. Rebuilding is probably going to take a while. Everyone nodded, including the Hokage. It would probably be months before everything was cleaned up and repaired. Last one then. Training, Naruto exclaimed. We're done with the last batch of techniques, and they've proven their worth on the battlefield. We need new ones if we want to continue to improve. A chorus of nods answered him. So, for the next meeting, I want everyone to go over our library again and bring up some suggestions. More nods. I have something to add, the unseated rabbit interrupted. Every council member turned in his direction. Go ahead, Naruto said. Miyamoto nodded. Ichibo, he said, and said rabbit rose on Naruto's head. You've been training alongside Naruto for more than 3 months now, and you've made no progress. I am sorry to say, but you should abandon the way of the sword. But, Ichibo stuttered. I'll do better. Miyamoto stopped him with a raised paw. It is something you cannot fix. I have tried training dozens like you before, and the results were the same. It is nothing based off the effort you make, you are simply not made for using a blade. Ichibo lowered his head in shame. However, another has accepted taking over your training, the rabbit continued. Monty has agreed to train you in his personal fighting style. As he possesses a frame similar to yours, I suspect you will find it much easier. Ichibo's head stayed down. Grandson, Nanaboa's voice rang out. There is no shame in this failure. Miyamoto was clear that you've given your best, and that is all that can be asked of you. Everyone has his weaknesses. He smirked. To this day, I haven't managed a single fire technique, and not for lack of trying. And I still lead the rabbits. Hi Usagi, Ichibo said in a small voice. The rabbit leader released a bark of laughter. How many times did I tell you not to call me that? Naruto rose in defense of his partner. Why not? I think it fits. Not you too? I call for a vote, Naruto exclaimed. Those in favor of Nanabo having the title of Usagi, raise your hand. The vote was instant and unanimous. All hands raised, including those of Hiruzen and Iruka, who shared a smile. Miyamoto's hand was up in support right behind his boss, and Ichibo shyly raised his hand last. All opposed? Nanabo rose from his seat right there, hand straight up. The 7 staves in his bag did the same. But the results were already clear. Motion passed, Naruto said, pounding his fist on the table. Usagi, please return to your seat. Nanabo did so with a pout, but one could clearly see his lips wanting to curl into a smile. Anything else? Naruto asked, and only received negative responses. Meeting adjourned then. Next one in a week barring emergencies. The Hokage's clone waited in his chair while the others filed out. He nodded to Iruka, who left. Gaara came forward as the last was exiting. The Kage Bunshin had noticed the boy was pensive during the entire meeting, and suspected that the Sangenin had finally come to a decision. Hokage-san, what steps would I have to take to be able to meet with my siblings? The boy asked, face neutral. How involved were you with the invasion? Sarutobi countered. Very little, Gaara replied after a moment's thoughts. The sole demand that was made of me was to release the Ichibi when the sleeping genjutsu struck. I had no information when this was to happen, or what else would be involved. And once the moment did come, I was too damaged to do so completely. The Hokage nodded, and grabbed 2 pieces of paper from the table. On the first he wrote signed instructions and a name, while on the other he wrote directions along with the time. He handed the boy both. Follow the path written on the second note, and give the first paper to the ninja whose name I have written down. He'll ask you more questions about the invasion, and will bring you to the rest of your family if you are cleared. The Sangenin bowed once more. Thank you, Sandaime-san. He then vacated the room, which left the Hokage's clone alone with his predecessor's son. So, Gigi, what do you think? Well, it's certainly impressive, the Hokage said. But I'm quite certain I haven't learned it all yet. Naruto smiled. Pretty sure. What did you want to know? Everything. Naruto raised an eyebrow. There's a lot to go over. You have the time? Yes, the clone said seriously. Tell me all. Naruto raised his eyes and thought for a moment. Well, he said after a moment. You know when it started. Mizuki gave me his extra exam, and I went. The Hokage's Bunshin was surprised to see light coming out of Iruka's office in the academy as he passed by after coming out of his meeting with Naruto. It was nearly midnight. Said clone, still in his natural form, knocked and entered the head teacher's room. You keep late hours, Iruka-san. The Chunin simply smiled. You're not the only one who's a clone right now, Hokage-sama. You. Hiruzen started then stopped. Right, Naruto has been teaching you. There had been so much information in that discussion that not everything had sunk in yet. You understand now why I said you had to see to believe? Indeed, the Hokage replied with a nod. Even with the proof I had, I can scarcely believe it. He basically turned the invasion around by himself. And that combination of techniques. Dangerous, isn't it? Iruka said. Yes, but so effective. And there are so many forbidden techniques that might be safe for clones. I've noticed, Hokage-sama. I'll have to think about this, about how to place him best. Something then came to mind, and Sarutobi smiled. If he stays alive, he'll be Hokage one day, I am now certain. Truly? It wasn't that Iruka doubted Naruto could achieve his dream, but it was a completely different thing to hear the current holder of said post say it with such certainty. He's done more at his age than any before. Even I, when the night aim suggested me. His eyes stared at the distance for a moment. Hadn't something like this to my account? And if he continues to grow at this rate, where do you see him in his early 20s? Iruka thought for a moment. Jonin, clearly. Possibly even multiple times. Indeed. He'll be close to, if not already at the level of the Sannin. And who in Konoha is around that level? Hatake Kakashi, maybe? With Guy not far behind. He thought some more. Your son Asuma might reach that level too. And none of them are interested in the post, the Hokage replied. Furthermore, they don't have the temperament for it. Kakashi's chronic lateness would be a disaster there, and Guy is difficult to approach. Asuma would be better, but the time he abandoned Konoha to work for the fire court would hurt him. There was a pause. I do now agree with your earlier assessment. He is much too talented to put on any regular genin team. The Iruka clone smiled. That reminds me, you've never said who you had in mind for their Jonin sensei. Hiruzen's Kage Bunshin told him. A smile crept on the lips of the teacher's copy. And, will you tell him about the prank? The Hokage shook his head. I wasn't planning to. After the report you gave me this afternoon, I prefer to err on the side of caution. I made sure to give Naruto the scroll with my signature. Iruka released a burst of laughter. Naruto will run rings around him, I'm certain. Prank day 112, but Hokage-sama, what about your grandson? Sarutobi sighed and grabbed his pipe. After taking a good puff of tobacco smoke, he fixed his eyes on the special Jonin before him. Ebisu, he started, and the man stood at attention. This is not a punishment, but an opportunity. You are among the best trainers in Konoha, and a dozen cases prove your mastery in training others. But tell me, Ebisu, the Hokage asked. How many genin teams have you trained? How many genin under you went on to the next level? None, Hokage-sama, the lower-ranked ninja finally admitted. Indeed, Sarutobi replied. You made it clear that, come Konohamaru's graduation, you wished to lead his team. Did you think I would give my grandson to an improving teacher? But Ebisu started, only to be interrupted. You've trained no team, you just told me, and I will not sacrifice 2 students just so my grandson is prepared properly for ninja life, the Hokage explained. As such, I am giving you a chance to prove yourself beforehand. How? Ebisu gulped. How so? You will train the team I put before you, and be their Jonin sensei. You have 2 years for them to be promoted to Chunin, and if you do so I will personally ensure that you lead my grandson's team. Ebisu's eyes went wide. All of them? 2 out of 3, at least, the Sandaime answered. The special Jonin's eyes fell down to the folders he'd been given. Must it be this team? A clanless kunoichi, an orphan from outside the village, and another orphan? Now we get to the root of the problem, Hiruzen thought. But that's not what he said. This is an easy team for someone of your talent, he answered instead. I have a number of letters that recommended Uzumaki Naruto skip the genin rank completely as he would be too skilled for it. Muramura here redirected an attack from Orochimaru himself to save me, while Joden Ariko has 12 takedowns in her name during the invasion, which even included a special Jonin. I don't see you having too many issues having them promoted. But, Ebisu started then stopped. But they aren't clan members, the Sandaime completed in his head. It was well known that Ebisu's difficulty at getting promoted had made him believe that only clan members could reach the top ranks, never mind all the exceptions. He wasn't the only one. Teams without clan members had the unfortunate tendency to fail any Jonin's personal exam. In the last 3 years, only teams with at least one member of a clan managed to reach actual genin rank. And no clan member failed during that time. Is this a task you do not believe you have the ability to perform? The Hokage asked, even though he already knew how the special Jonin would answer. I can find another, if you cannot. He left out the implied meaning that this included Konohamaru's future team. Of course not, Hokage-sama. Then you have your orders, Ebisu, the Hokage exclaimed, making the decision final. You are now the Jonin sensei of Team 1. They will be expecting you tomorrow at 8 in the morning at Training Ground 7. Prank Day 113. Naruto was the last to arrive at Training Ground 7, being barely on time. This was on purpose, as Gigi had confirmed that the prank was still going, that his 2 clones would be his teammates, and that his teacher would not have been informed. As so, he made sure to arrive as late as possible while still being on time, as a diversion. His 2 copies were already there, as was the man he supposed would be their sensei. He was tall and gangly, and seemed uniformly forgettable. What he wore only helped reinforce that fact: dark blue shirt and pants, cloth of the same color hiding his hair, and dark sunglasses that hid his eyes completely. Outside the Konoha headband on his head, everything else was camouflaged. "You are," the man said, glaring down at Naruto, "seconds from being late. In the future, please make sure to be present 5 minutes early in case of emergency, correct?" There was quite a bit of ice in the man's voice. "Yes, sensei," Naruto replied. "Well, since everyone is finally there," the special jonin said, looking at everyone in turn. "I am Shikomu Ebisu, and I have been selected as Jonin Sensei for Team 1. I am ranked as Tokubetsu Jonin, and am a specialist in various forms of training. As a person, I enjoy teaching others seafood and certain types of literature. My personal goal is to train someone who goes on to become Hokage." He smiled. "Now, the same from each of you. As a team, we will be working and bleeding together, and as such we should trust each other. And sharing secrets is the foundation of trust." Naruto grinned. The man wanted to teach an Hokage. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto," he answered immediately. "I'm a genin, and I suppose a ninjutsu specialist. I like training, ramen, and pranks. My goal is become Hokage one day." Ebisu did not react except for a tightening of his traits. "Next one?" he said, looking at the other 2. "My name is Mirumaru," the clone said, fully serious. "And I'm both a genin and a taijutsu specialist. I like improving my sharp fist, sushi, and learning about the past. My own goal is mastering the sharp fist and teaching it to the next generation." Ebisu nodded this time, then turned to his female student. "Your turn." "I'm Joden Ariko, and the little guy upstairs is Ichibo," said Rabbit Waved. "I'm a genin, a member of the Konoha fashion squad, and I suppose a range specialist. I like playing with my partner, meetings with the rest of the squad, and yakiniku. My goal is to make sure we members of the Konoha fashion squad go as far up the ranks as possible." Ebisu nodded again. There didn't seem to be any animosity between the 3, which was always a bonus. "The Hokage has tasked me with making sure that this team be promoted to Chunin within the next 2 years. As such, I will be pushing as hard as I can to make sure you are ready for the rank. Now, as to training," the sensei spoke. "Our days will be split into 3 periods. From 8 in the morning to 1, we will be here, training. This period will be focused on team exercises, physical training, and combat scenarios. Each of you must have taken a good breakfast, as we will not break for lunch until 1. From 2 to 7 will be missions," Ebisu said as he continued his explanation. "I will be selecting them, and I expect the best times possible from all of you. With luck, we might clear multiple missions every day. Since a number of completed missions is necessary for advancement, I suspect it is in everyone's interest to have as many as possible until your belts. Lastly, from 8 to 10 will be individual training. I will alternate between all of you, and work on either improving your talents or eliminating your weaknesses. I shall still expect 2 hours of training from those I will not be visiting," he said while looking directly at Naruto. "Am I being clear?" "Yes," the 3 students chorused. "Then, we will be starting right now with an evaluation," Ebisu continued. "Every jutsu or skill each of you can use. Those not performing will be listening attentively. Knowledge about an ally's techniques is crucial for proper battle planning. I expect, after today, that everyone here will possess good knowledge about his teammates' capacities. Now, Ariko, you go first." Ebisu watched intently as the 3 went and showed their abilities. This might not be his preferred team, but he was a professional. He would give the work his all. Ariko seemed a pretty basic kunoichi, though the jutsu she knew for empowering thrown weapons was effective. Miramara seemed pretty much your usual taijutsu specialist, but him already knowing the tree-walking technique was a clear advantage. He probably had the chakra control necessary to start on elemental jutsu. The Uzumaki child was the biggest surprise though. He could use the shadow clone technique, both normal and mass versions, something that was unheard of from a child that age. He also had some bizarre fire sphere technique, which Ebisu supposed was the boy's element. The blonde genin also professed to proficiency in high-level trapping techniques, though that wasn't something he could demonstrate easily. All in all, Ebisu supposed this wasn't a bad haul. The first two students didn't have much more than the basics, but what they had was at least a good start. The Uzumaki kid didn't seem as good in his basics, but what he had more than compensated for the deficiency. He could work with that. He'd started with much worse in the past.